Fully Threaded Radio, episode 139. Okay.
I did get some questions from scattering of people.
Oh, dear. Okay.
So here's a kind of off-the-cuff one. If you could give the fastener industry a kick in the ass in any particular direction, which would it be?
It's time for Fully Threaded Radio.
It is Fully Threaded Radio, voice of the FCH Sourcing Network. Yes, it's another big episode of Fastener Industry Talk Radio. And when I say big, yes, it is big because there's big news in the fastener industry and we've got a big interview, a long-awaited big interview, I might add. Hey, everybody, Eric Dudas here, and I'm joined with fastener industry media sensation, Brian Musker. Hey, Brian, you doing all right?
Can you redo that one, please?
The industry is wall-to-wall Brian Musker. I mean, it's got to be pretty cool.
Right, yeah. So if everyone else is making except mine, I understand this, okay? Anyway, hi, everyone.
Yeah, well, what they don't understand is that getting you on the Fastener Talk blog and in Fastener Technology International magazine, and now today with the big interview, it's a lot like dressing your dog up for Halloween. You know, it kind of goes along with it, but not really.
In your mind, mate.
No, I think it's going along swimmingly. Just as an added bonus is you're watching a parrot, your neighbor's parrot while they're on vacation.
Yeah.
So it's almost like we got a kookaburra in the background for...
It's an African grey and it talks continuously, even though I've done all these attempts to try and shut it up, okay? However, these are these little crosses we have to bear.
Yes. Well, I think Fully Threaded Radio listeners are used to it. First fastener dogs, now fastener parrots.
Yeah, fastener dogs are much easier to manage, I can tell you that.
Yeah, they're a lot more fun too.
Yeah.
Cleaner. Hey, everybody, it's episode 139 of Fully Threaded Radio. Thank you so much for clicking in. We're publishing this time just a tad late, but we'll get it on or about April 18th, 2019. The big industry news I was alluding to, of course, is the big news coming out of the Linfast group, which a lot of us used to know simply as Lindstrom and Stellfast. And now Nautic Partners has come in to acquire that entity. Mike McNulty's got details on the Fastener News Report today. And we're going to try in forthcoming episodes to fill in some of the gaps there. We didn't get a lot out of the Harbor Group after the Stellfast acquisition, Bri.
Yeah, I know.
And I guess maybe this is why, because maybe a deal like this was in the works. Who knows? We don't know. We're speculating, but
we will find out, okay? And when we find out, all of our listeners will find out.
We will do our best. And, of course, the big interview today, Mr. Brian Musker is interviewed. He sat down with Marty Nolan of RL English.
Yeah. And
really let a lot out there. I mean, I think this is a pretty good interview. People who are interested in a little bit more about where you came from and what you're doing and your thoughts on a whole variety of subjects come out during this conversation. Congratulations on this.
Yeah, well, this sort of comes out of a meeting up with Marty. Remember this? After workout one Friday morning, I think, just at the restaurant up near your gym, and sitting down and talking through things, and Marty saying, we need to interview you. There's lots of people that need to get interviewed, a lot more than me, okay? But whatever.
Well, it is the 139th episode, Bri, and I've actually received numerous requests from various listeners over the years, so I kind of pushed you into it. Thanks for doing it. I think it's a very, very good listen, a little longer than usual, but that's to be expected because you've got a lot to say. You're an interesting person, and Fully Threaded fans, true fans, will get a lot out of it. Plus, for those of you more interested in the more standard fastener industry fare. We've got a conversation with Kevin Chavis and George Hunt III. They sat down with me to review the recent NFDA MWFA PAC West conference that happened out in San Diego. We cover that wall to wall for you. And just ahead of the Fastener News Report, Bryan Wheeler of Star Stainless gives us his review of the Stuttgart show, which also took place recently. Many of you know that's still the largest fastener industry trade show on the planet, so we'll get his impressions. On the Fastener News Report, Mike McNulty's joined by Bob GQ Baer as they review the recent FDI numbers. And as always, Carmen Vertullo's got the Fastener Training Minute for us.
Yep.
And as an added bonus, in just a couple of moments, we're going to speak with Carroll Henning. She's with Fastener Fair USA. That's the next big event on the fastener industry calendar. She'll give us a last-minute preview there. And if all of that was not enough, ladies and gentlemen, we've got a story that might be interesting to you, regardless of your politics, whether you're a supporter of the current administration or the previous one. Here's a rare example of governmental continuity and the involvement of one of our great sponsors, Parker Fasteners. We'll throw that in at the very end, Bri.
Ooh, I thought we were keeping away from politics for a while.
No, it's parrots we're trying to keep away from at the moment.
Both of those things, actually.
I said it was big, Bri.
Yeah, I know.
And we've got a big list of sponsors for Fully Threaded Radio. And Brian, I know you've got access to it. Please do share.
So we enjoy talking about our sponsors because they're good people in this industry and they're good to us. The title sponsors of Fully Threaded Radio are Steadfast and Brighton Best International. Steadfast, for service you deserve and people you trust. Brighton Best International, tested, tried and true. Also sponsoring Fully Threaded Radio are Buckeye Fasteners, BTM Manufacturing, Eurolink Fastener Supply Service, Fastener Fair USA, InSequel Software, ND Industries, Parker Fasteners, Volt Industrial Plastics, the International Fastener Expo, the Worth Group, and Solution Industries, home of Solution Man. So thanks to all of you, and if you're a Fully Threaded listener, make sure you make use of these great sponsors, okay? You need to buy fasteners, buy them from them, okay?
Thank you, sir. And thanks to all of the sponsors.
Yep.
And thanks to each and every one of you for listening in. We really do appreciate it.
Right.
Get with us anytime. The email address is ftr@fullythreaded.com, and check out our occasional Twitter posts.
Very occasional from me, more so from Eric. Okay.
Yeah, I noticed that didn't come up in your interview, Brian.
I got some comments because Marty was in town Monday night, and there was a group of people met up somewhere in Naperville, and I got some reference from Bob Baer that I was not there. I had a typical of my current organisation and schedule, something I have to do almost every night, and it was something else on. It was just some things are such a mess at the moment.
Yes, you're supposed to be our representative these days at the Naperville Fastener Association.
I know. Right. It's meant to be that as you sort of have time to schedule these things. I have all this crap scheduled up like years ahead, and it's just I look through, see, do I have an hour free? No.
Well, with all the things you do, maybe it's a blessing that you're not out there on Twitter. One more item we need to bring up before we get to Carroll Henning of Fastener Fair USA is that Fastener Training Minute fans will be glad to hear that a new series of YouTube videos is being released. We started with our first one. Which one was that, Brian? It was the one about sending specimens to test labs. I forget if that was 137 or 138, but that's available out there on YouTube right now, folks. So we've tried to make that information that Carmen Vertullo provides every episode just a little bit more user-friendly if you want to jump back to it. So it's on YouTube.
All more accessible too. So it turned out pretty good, actually. And there's another one which we're sort of waiting for. It's waiting for me to create another scheduling conflict with the parrot's not round to talk about the scrubber. Yeah.
Yeah, actually, there are a couple more that are in process, Bri, that you don't know about. But yes, seeing your input from that particular one, we've got all the rest of it done. So get out to YouTube, punch in Fully Threaded Radio, or you can type in Fastener Training Minute, or you can type in FCH Sourcing Network. Any of those things will bring up this new Fastener Training Minute video. Enjoy.
Yeah, and I want to point out those are also brought to us by our great sponsors.
Good point. They make it all possible.
Yep.
Speaking of which, just a moment ago, you ran down the fine sponsors of Fully Threaded Radio. Of course, one of them is and has been Fastener Fair USA. Now, that event is coming right up, Bri.
Yeah, I know.
We've talked a lot about that in the last few months. We'll be out there looking forward to it. And we figured we'd give one more pitch for Fastener Fair USA happening in Detroit. And this time around, we'll be speaking with a new face of Fastener Fair. She's Carroll Henning. She's with us now. Hi, Carroll.
Hi. How are you guys?
I'm doing pretty good, thanks.
Things must be getting quite frantic there at the Fastener Fair offices. Tell us all about that.
Oh, frantic it is, but in a good way. We've got lots. We're gearing up for a really big second year of Fastener Fair at the Cobo Center in Detroit, as you mentioned. And we've got 250 plus exhibitors that have signed up with us from the U.S. and abroad. We're expecting over 2,500 Fastener Fair professionals to participate in the event. So we're all set. We're looking forward to being in Detroit as well.
Those sound like really strong numbers.
They are. They are up from last year. Again, very excited about lots of momentum coming out of our Cleveland show and looking forward to the same kind of really great vibe in Detroit. It's a big manufacturing hub there, so we know there's going to be lots of folks to meet and network with.
I'm thinking of other things to do in Detroit as well, so I haven't quite made my mind up yet.
Well, maybe the welcome party is what you're thinking about. Because there is
Exactly.
That was one of them, yeah.
The welcome party. We're having the welcome party again on May the 22nd, the first night of the show, and it's going to be a Motown theme. So that will be fun.
Perfect.
It's going to be at the GM Renaissance Center right on the river. You'll be able to have tours of the GM display. So we expect a really great after party after a very busy day on the day one. So you don't want to miss that. And we're staying in Detroit theme for this one. So
Okay, I can live with that.
And once again, everybody, this is happening May 22nd and 23rd. The website for more details and to get registered is fastenerfair.com/USA. Carroll, run down the highlights for us really quickly. We know we have this great welcome bash to look forward to. And if I recall, last time Fastener Fair rolled into, it was Cleveland last time, actually. But one of the great things was the education series. Very well attended. I think that was definitely one of the strengths of the show. What's happening this time?
Yes, absolutely. We're actually building off of the great response that we got last year in Cleveland, and we have 2 stages this year on the floor. We'll have our Tech Talk stage with subjects like fundamentals of threaded fasteners and bolted joint consistency, flexible fastener automation, and simultaneously we'll have another stage called distributor innovation, which is really going to be talking more about the operations, the business operation side of it. So look for subjects about transportation and tariffs and launching e-commerce and that kind of good stuff. We do have a new session that we're going to start about business-to-business marketing. So that'll be a nice panel for folks who are looking to give their marketing efforts a tune-up. And something I'm super excited about is we're going to have a presentation by the Michigan Aerospace Manufacturers Association, and they're going to be talking about the Michigan Launch Initiative, which is going to be really cool. Did you know that the Detroit area in Michigan is expecting a rocket launch pad to be coming their way? So the organizers of that effort are going to be telling us what's happening with that and how you can get in on the action in terms of doing business related to setting up the launch pad in Michigan.
That sounds extremely interesting.
Wow.
And I know you don't know Brian that well yet, but you're really getting into risky territory here, because this could turn into like an hour-long segment.
Really?
Oh, yeah. But let me shut that down real quick and just point out that folks who are interested in the education series will be happy to know that our very own Carmen Vertullo is on the docket. You can get out again to fastenerfair.com, where there is a Tech Talk Theater schedule right online. You can schedule your day, plan ahead, maximize your time out there at Fastener Fair. What are some of the other highlights you want to share with fully threaded listeners, Carol?
Well, let me, just as a reminder, the Tech Talk and the distributors are stages that are right on the expo floor. So those are included with registration. So that's the nice thing. You could come in and visit with your suppliers and your vendors, and then jump into a session and kind of bounce back and forth. So that makes it really convenient and included. So that's nice. We do have one session that we're kicking off early on Wednesday, the 22nd, from 9 to right before the show floor opens. Our keynote speaker is going to be Steve Blue, and he happens to be the author of a book called Metamorphosis: From Rust Belt to High Tech in the 21st Century. So Steve is going to be warming up the crowd for us and talking about how folks can transform and ignite their processes, their manufacturing processes, and before the show officially opens at 10 o'clock. So hope to see folks out there bright and early. I think Steve is going to be handing out copies of his book, so that's going to be great. And that's just another a new idea to try to get everyone up and going before the show floor opens. So between the education and the networking and obviously the new products and technology that folks are going to be able to find, it's going to be an event that you are definitely not going to want to miss.
That sounds pretty interesting, actually. Normally that's when the time I take to make sure all my electronics are still working, but maybe I might take it on faith and listen instead.
Yeah, well, they call him the Steve Jobs of the Rust Belt economy. So there you go.
Okay.
You're hitting all the hot buttons, Carol.
Yeah, right.
Oh, boy.
You have no idea. You have no idea.
All righty then. Sounds like we're going to have lots of folks there with Brian.
Well, this is all getting quite exciting, Carol. And before we let you get to it with final detail prep and stuff like that, why don't you run down for us, please, the fine list of supporters of Fastener Fair USA? I know you got some big names.
We do. We are so grateful. We've got the National Fastener Distributors Association who's supporting us. The Young Fasteners Professionals will be doing their event as well, their networking activity. Obviously, Fastener Training Institute will be doing their thing the day before with Fastening 101. And also we have Women in the Fastening Industry. We're putting together a really great mentoring, women to women mentoring program that we're going to launch in Detroit. So we're very happy to be working with them on that, and stand by for more details on that program.
You going to send the lovely and talented Lynn Dempsey over there, Bri?
Yeah, probably, actually.
Good call.
Yeah.
All right, everybody. May 22nd, 23rd, Detroit, Cobo Center. Be there. I forgot what our booth number is, but it'll be a lot of laughs happening there. Thanks for joining us, Carol.
Thanks for having me.
Good to talk to you. I think this is our first time, and we look forward to seeing you in person out there.
We'll see you in Detroit.
See you in Detroit.
Yep. Thanks so much.
Okay, cool.
This was a good way to launch the show, Bri. We've got a huge one today, as you well know. You among all people. Thanks for clicking in, everybody. It's fully threaded.
All right.
Brian and Eric, your online Fastener Talk Radio brothers in thread. Fully threaded radio.
At Brighton Best, we continue to expand our wide range of products, including stainless steel and metric fasteners. Our family of brands include Preferred, U.S. Anchor, and Ironclad Performance Wear. BBI has been a trusted partner since 1925. With award-winning hand tools, gloves, and drywall screws, BBI is the largest master distributor of fasteners in the USA. Tested, tried, and true. We are Brighton Best. To learn more about Brighton Best, visit brightonbest.com.
Hey, Fastener professionals. One of the most anticipated events in the fastener industry is just around the corner. Make plans today to attend Mack Brooks Fastener Fair USA, which takes place in Detroit, May 22nd and 23rd, 2019. Over 300 companies from around the world will exhibit at Fastener Fair USA in 2019, showcasing the latest solutions for key industries like automotive, aerospace, construction, power gen, MRO, and more. In addition to exhibits during 2 full days on the show floor, you'll find plenty of topical information and technical and distribution conference sessions, and networking events, such as the opening night reception. No matter where you fall in the supply chain, Fastener Fair USA is your opportunity to join more than 2,000 manufacturers, suppliers, distributors, and end users in the heart of the Midwest at Detroit's Cobo Center, May 22nd and 23rd, 2019. For more information and to register today, go to www.fastenerfair.com/USA. See you at Mack Brooks Fastener Fair USA.
Hey mates, Brian Musker. Regardless of the required size, material or finish, Eurolink has the European resources to meet your demands for hard-to-find metric fasteners. We're the one-stop source for all of your metric needs, saving you time and money searching for these parts while fulfilling all of your requirements. How do we do it? Eurolink offers access to more than 100,000 quality C-class parts with the ability to solve your toughest metric fastener supply issues every time. Hard-to-find metric fasteners? Delivered. Just think of us as your heavy metal rock stars. To learn more about how we can rock your world or request a hassle-free quote online, visit eurolinkfss.com. That's eurolinkfss.com.
Need fasteners? Fully threaded radio listeners know that StealthFast offers over 12,000 fastener items direct from stock, including bolts, cap screws, nuts, screws, and washers in a variety of finishes. Per print, specials, and standards, StealthFast has been a global sourcing leader since 1972. As an ISO-certified supplier with facilities across North America and Asia, each member of the StealthFast team is dedicated to supporting fastener distributors with the highest quality products and service possible. That's why the motto remains, for service you deserve and people you trust, it's StealthFast.
Hi, this is John Riddell from Solution Industries, and you are listening to Fully Threaded Radio.
Thanks for clicking into Fully Threaded Radio, everybody. Fastener Truth Seekers, one and all. Well, Brian's taking this segment off. He's probably, I hope, preparing for the big interview, which is coming up later in the show. A first in Fully Threaded Radio history by popular demand. Well, also by popular demand, recently there was a huge fastener rodeo that happened out in San Diego. This was March 14th through the 16th. And it was a joint conference with the NFDA, the Pac West, and the Midwest Fastener Association. First time that ever happened. And joining me now to discuss that are two guys who have been to this fastener rodeo before from the Pac West. He's the current president and I guess longtime president, Kevin Chavis. Hey, Kevin.
How you doing?
Hanging in there. It's good to see you out there recently. And along with us, it's George Hunt III from Brighton Best, and also now a board member with the MWFA. Hey, George.
Eric, how you doing? Thanks for having me.
You bet. Great to get you guys together. And as I said, it's really, I guess, a sign of the times that this event happened with all three of these associations. And I wanted to invite you to speak to it because, as I said, you're both representatives of regional associations. And so we got a little bit to talk about here. Before we get into that, both of you, of course, work on the supply side, really, of the fastener industry. Everybody knows Star Stainless and Brighton Best International, of course. And you're both right in the catbird seat for seeing kind of what's going on in the industry. Could you give us a thumbnail, really, what you're seeing out there today? George Hunt III, why don't you give us first your view of where things are sitting?
Sure, no problem. I think everybody hopes and prays for another 2018, but I think we're smart enough to know that that's something that's only happens once in a blue moon. But I see a lot of good things happening in 2019. I really do. I think markets that were softer in years past are starting to climb. And I see a lot of volume still penetrating different markets that we hadn't been in years past. So the outlook for 2019 is optimistic and positive, and we hope to have another increase when it's all said and done.
I know it's difficult to tell where your customers are selling or what markets they're selling into, but do you have any kind of feel for sort of a sector by sector current situation out there?
Well, construction's always been our lifeline. And for the last 5 to 7 years, construction has continued to progress forward and climb. So that's really where we've been hanging our hat most these days. But we're also seeing a climb in gas and oil as well, in the fracking down south and in the Dakotas. And we also see ag starting to take maybe a plunge northward, where they've been flat or have really been down in 2018 and 2017. So with those markets really looking up, that's why we probably see a very bright future for 2019.
Kevin, can you jump in on this? What's Star Stainless seeing out there?
I agree with George a lot on this. There's a lot of optimism in the marketplace. You know, people are holding their own, if not growing, and no problem with supply, no problem with demand on our end, that's for sure. And we've got some areas, like George says, that just keep growing. You know, if they ever put through the infrastructure bill, we could see a lot of growth, which would be good for everybody.
You know, recently we had Craig Penland on the podcast from Eurolink, and he made a passing reference to Virage. And a couple months back, well, it's a little more than a couple months, but a lot of listeners might remember that we were talking about this big shakeup in stainless. The huge supplier Virage had some issues, and they now can't sell to, I guess, a variety of markets, including North America. Has that all stabilized and shaken out? I mean, is everything back to kind of a new norm in the stainless area now?
Yeah, I don't think they ever really made a blip in the market when they went away. You know, we never saw a bunch of shortages. It got tight for a little bit, but everybody figured it out. So, you know, the market is stable. The market's actually in good shape.
I guess we're going to keep carrying on. Is that pretty much it?
Yeah. What do you think, George?
No, Kevin's right. I mean, the source of supply really hasn't declined. Distributors like Star Stainless, Brighton Best International, our niche really is inventory and having it on the off chance that our distributors need it. I know between Star and Brighton Best, we made sure that the inventory levels remained high so that our distributors wouldn't even feel situations such as what happened to Virage impede on their success. So Kevin's absolutely right. This is something that was unfortunate, but something that our industry took, and we just moved forward with it.
Well, that's what you have to do. So I didn't want to open the whole can of worms again, but since it did come up, I wanted to get it right from authoritative sources.
You use that term loosely, right?
Everybody knows you know what's going on, Kev. So let's turn now to the conference. It was good to see both of you guys out there for sure. And I thought that just looking at the room on that opening night during the welcoming ceremony, or I guess it's really a welcome bash as it turned out, and the room was quite full. So from that measure, it was a success. Kevin, what did you think? You're really kind of on your home turf out there.
Yeah, you know, actually we exceeded the number of people that we thought would attend. We ended up with 226 attendees. I guess people wanted to get out of the cold of the Midwest and get out to sunny San Diego. It was beautiful. We couldn't have asked for a better time and a better turnout, better group of people.
Yeah, the room was buzzing, which is great. And I think those networking events really help solidify the week. It sets the tone, and it really allows people to kind of flip the switch and get into kind of a mode where networking becomes the norm for the next 3 to 4 days, and trying to make the most out of what was a great agenda put on by the NFDA.
Yeah, the networking is the key to it. We can put on all the great programs in the world, but if people don't get out there and network and talk to each other, then none of us are going to know what's going on in this industry. And that's the whole key. We need to keep up with what's going on.
100%. And I have to say that, as usual, Vicky's team did their usual fantastic job. And of course, Nancy Rich and company were there to fill their role as well. My first question is, was the distribution across the 3 regionals that were involved, was it pretty even, and was it about what you were expecting?
It was about what we expected. With all the crossover, we've got a lot of people that are dual members, and we had a bunch that were members of all 3 associations. So, we all contributed, and people came out and supported it. It was nice to see. And whenever we get the big group like that, we're able to put on better programs. We're able to have people, bring in better speakers. So it's kind of nice.
Yeah, I think it was very well attended. I think all 3 regions and associations really did their due diligence to make sure that people were there. The collaboration between all 3 associations was great. And I can't agree with you more, Eric. I mean, the work that Vicky and Janine and Nancy had done to help put on this event, and let's be honest, those are the 3 individuals who really got down and dirty and made sure that all the events that were put on paper came to fruition. I really appreciate all their hard work and what they do for our industry. So thank you.
Yeah, they really make it look easy. It's easy to take for granted the fact that things flow well, but believe me, having been involved in some things that didn't go so well, no small order.
Those were probably mine and Kevin's fault. So.
Yeah. I blame this guy.
Yeah, don't worry. We edited all that out, guys. Well, I don't really want to spend the segment here going through the whole schedule of what happened. Okay. Everybody who's been to one of these conferences knows that there's usually a couple of speakers, some panels at the Pac West, or is it the NFDA now? I forget, but there's usually a session where there's round tables, one with managers, one with owners, which is always a very beneficial chance to share insights and so forth with your colleagues in the industry. And all those things happen. And then on Saturday, people usually start to peel off, heading back home or out to tour the local city. And I guess this time there was an economist, and that was pretty interesting from what I heard. It all went well. I guess the highlight for me was on Friday, the presentation by Dirk Beveridge. And I guess the theme of it would have been the age of disruption. I got a lot out of that conference, although it was a little overwhelming. George, what did you take away as the most important event of the meeting?
I agree with you. Dirk really set the tone for the weekend. And you're right. He is emotional. He's animated, and he cares a lot about what he does. And there's passion in his voice when he talks. And I think a couple things that he really hit on were, the history and the narrative of what a distributor or what suppliers want to do needs to be our focus for tomorrow. And he would come back to that point periodically throughout his presentation and really tie what the NFDA was trying to do with all the 3 associations as a collaboration for the weekend. And that is to try and get our associations to understand that there are new things happening in this great industry and in this market. And if we're not ready to tackle those new things and adapt to change, we're going to see other distributors take our place. And I think that really hit hard to the audience that was at Dirk's presentation. And I really think it set the stage for the weekend.
Yeah, it was kind of the theme. The theme that I got out of the whole thing was change and optimism. You hit it right on the head. If you're not going to change, you might not be here tomorrow, or there's going to be people that find another way of doing things. Kurt Zender did a great presentation at lunchtime. A lot of humor in it, but the underlying message was change. And if you're not ready for it, you better become ready.
Right.
And the optimism part comes from, the economist, Dr. Chris Thornburg, that we had on Saturday, that made everybody feel that everything was okay. No matter what noise you're hearing, no matter what all the news stations and the stock market saying, everything's okay.
Right. So that optimism is good until the end of 2019, from what I heard secondhand from that presentation. So the shelf life on the optimism is till at least through 2019, right?
Yeah.
If you ask these two.
Yeah, because I agree with you guys. I mean, the theme was changed through the whole thing. But on the other hand, the optimism or the good feelings about that, frankly, I think some guys are really shaken by it a little bit. I mean, let's face it, the other term that was used in Dirk Beveridge's presentation that Fully Threaded listeners are familiar with is VUCA, right? Which stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. Now, that's not a walk in the park for a lot of people, okay? A lot of people just wish they could go on and it was still 1998 and margins were still what they were then, and,
But he really conceptualized the phrase VUCA. And what I appreciated in Dirk's presentation was that he kind of drew a roadmap for all distributors in the audience on how to succeed, or how he put it, how to win, right? And in this path, I think the best thing about the path was there wasn't one end game. He had several end games, 4 in fact. And you being the distributor, if you were a $100 distributor, a stocking distributor, a warehousing distributor, what have you, you choose your own path. You try to think about where you want to go, where you are today, and what path best suits you. And I really think distributors in the audience at Dirk's presentation appreciated that, because he wasn't trying to pigeon-toe anybody in that room. He was trying to say, here are the tools, here's what you need to do, and you figure out which path is best for you.
I agree, George. I think that those themes are a message that a lot of people need to hear for sure, and they're an ongoing theme here on this podcast. I just don't think that a lot of people are comfortable with that message.
Yeah, change is never really comfortable, and it's not a comforting thing. But if you're not ready to change and willing to change, then like he says, you could be in trouble.
Yeah. Well, age of disruption and all that. Well, anyway, it's a fact of life, and it was very beneficial and very well presented during this conference. So I think we could kind of leave it there, but this is one of the reasons you need to be coming to these kinds of conferences, everybody. And let's now take a look at, or discuss briefly, what this conference represented in terms of really what had been, I guess, Kevin, you mentioned it before we turned on the recorder a little bit about what you said, like 15 years. I knew about maybe 8 or 10 years of the NFDA kind of saying, hey, everybody, we need to consolidate and put together a national front for fastener associations. And there's been some resistance to that, and it was a slow road. But now with this, I mean, does this event represent to you what it seems to represent to me, which is sort of an organic manifestation of that concept?
Yeah, it represents, the problem we have as an industry is that we're regionalized, and, what happens in the West isn't always what's going to happen in the East. And pretty rare does that happen at the same time. We're a big country. We've all got our place, and, it's nice to get together and see everybody and with all the groups. And like I said, it helps us put together a little bit better programming. But all in all, I think that the associations, for the most part, if we don't figure out how to service our members, then we need to probably do that. It comes down to membership and bringing distributors in and having answers for current problems and issues.
Yeah, Kevin's right. I mean, there's really two main questions, right? Is there a reason for a regional association? And are we saturating the market with too many associations? Is it just sensory overload? Is there too much to pick and choose from? Kevin's right. We need to have regional associations because there are differences in how we go about supplying to certain regions. But there's also differences in our customer base as well. Not every region has a multi-billion-dollar distributor or wholesaler. Not every region has distributors that have multi-tenant branches throughout the continental United States. Some regions have local $100 distributors that really don't care what's going on in the West or the East. They just want to know what's going on at home in the South. So I think it's important for our regional associations to step up, to understand what our distributors and our vendors need, and to fill that void that they're searching for. But I also think that associations across the country need to stay connected, and we need to continue to collaborate because it makes our association stronger. And that's why I applaud the NFDA, the PacWest, the Midwest Fastener Association, in coming together and really putting on this event, allowing their members that deem it necessary to go out and partake.
Yeah, I think you just summed it up. You really very well stated the reason that the regionals need to exist, and but also on a national level, there has to be some collaboration too. So, and in the age of disruption, we have the tools to be able to, I think, handle all of it. We just have to figure out how we're going to structure it. So thank you for your comments on those issues, gentlemen, because they keep rattling around. They're going to continue to rattle around, but this event was certainly an indication that it's not an issue that's gone away. As evidence of that, prepping for this, I picked up a hard copy of the Global Fastener News, which John had left everybody, and a complimentary copy. And I noticed right there on the interior, there was a story about the Southwestern Fastener Association grappling with similar questions. So you guys aren't alone on your boards. And one thing I noticed in particular was something that we talked about quite a bit at the North Coast Fastener Association. And I was on the board there for a while, guys. And that had to do with the scholarship committee decisions on where to direct this money. And what they've decided to do at Southwest is divert some of these funds more to fastener education specifically, whereas it had been a general education fund previously. I think a lot of associations are grappling with that same question.
Yeah, education, the fastener industry, education is huge. And as people grow older, I remember, it feels like last year I was the young guy in the industry, and we all know that's not the case anymore. As everybody's getting older and moving on, we've got to educate the younger people to keep it going. There are a lot of nuances to fasteners that people should be training their people on. Be promoting the industry. Fastener Training Institute gets out there and they put on training programs for everyone. Why does fasteners work? It was great to see Salim Brahimi and Joe Greenslade Friday morning. Those are fastener icons.
Yeah, that's a great point, Kevin. I wanted to bring that up and I totally forgot. Thank you for mentioning it, because in addition to having the three associations, the IFI made a strong presence be known there, right? And that was really kind of cool.
Yeah, Joe's been around forever. He's the go-to guy. There are some other people coming up, Carmen Vertullo and others that are filling in Joe's spot and learning, but Joe was the main guy for a lot of years. We need to promote that and get more of those people in this industry.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's been a shift, right? I think a lot of what we have talked about is how are these associations going to remain relevant. And associations in the past have really hung their hat on education and scholarships. How much money can we give away? what kind of pertinent information can we bring to the table in terms of trying to get our members more in tune with what's going on in the market. But I think a lot of what you're starting to hear now are associations really trying to give back to their members by training distributors and training suppliers and individuals in this market on fasteners and what our market's all about. I really believe that if we continue to train these individuals, our industry is going to be better for it in years to come. And as Kevin alluded to, the hour presentation that Salim put together with Joe, the FTI and the IFI is very important to our industry and what we do. And distributors out there need to start taking advantage of these programs that they're putting on.
I had the chance to meet Dan Walker, who's the new executive director of the IFI. Strangely, he was seated right next to me on the flight from Chicago to Vegas during the Las Vegas show. So we had a lot of chance to compare notes and stuff. And I ran by him my idea that I've thrown out a couple times over the years about an NFDA versus IFI golf tournament.
I think in today's world, NFDA would be in trouble.
Yeah, but not for reasons probably that Dan thought of. The funny thing was he said, well, it could never work because the NFDA guys would feel obligated to let the IFI guys win. But I still think there's some room for that kind of crossover because it's been a weird kind of a chasm that I'm sure makes a lot of sense to a lot of people, and I'm just naive and I don't see it. But I've fished around for ways to strengthen that particular crossover as well. Makes me wonder, aren't there any other kinds of activities that we could do? Maybe the golf isn't going to work, but what else could we do? George, actually, before the session today, we were talking about a novel concept, I thought, and that would be developing our own version of sort of a theatrical-only wrestling league, like a WWE style thing. You got the look for that, George.
Yeah, but I don't. I couldn't hurt a teddy bear, that's for sure.
Yeah. Just don't let George wear his golf uniform.
All style, no substance. I mean, I'm not a very good golfer, so I have to do something to at least make it, look as though that I've tried during the course of the day. So. But no, I think, my best move for WWE would be getting into the fetal position and crying in the corner. So that would be my move.
I don't know if any of us truly appreciate the skill that goes into that whole choreography part, but my guess is that you'd be just fine at it. I'm still stuck on this whole idea of Rich Cavoto in a unitard. Imagine that. He'd be one of these. Maybe I shouldn't have gone there.
No, that'd be a sight for sore eyes. I'd pay money. I'd pay money for that.
Just remember, you can't unsee it.
And nobody will be able to unhear this segment of Fully Threaded Radio. A historical event at the NFDA in San Diego, and now a historical segment. Well, that's what we do here on Fully Threaded. And gentlemen, I'd like to thank you for chiming in because I think it's an important event that we've touched on here today. I hope there are more of them in the future. And thank you very much for being part of the organizations that made them a reality.
Oh, thank you, Eric. And thanks, George, for your input and supporting it. Appreciate you guys. It's a lot of fun. We'll do it again.
Absolutely. Thank you, Kevin. And Eric, thanks for having us. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about all the good things that were happening out there.
There's lots of Fastener events coming up. We'll see you all down the road, guys. And thanks once again.
Thank you.
Hey, everybody. There's lots more Fully Threaded coming. Thanks for clicking in.
Since 1905, Buckeye Fasteners and the Ohio Nut and Bolt Company have been supplying the world with high-quality fasteners. Our standard product lines include weld fasteners, braided weld screws, leg levelers, self-clinching hardware, clevis pins, rivet nuts, and various other fastener lines, allowing us to support virtually all types of industries. We have complete custom manufacturing capabilities in low carbon, medium carbon, and stainless steel materials, and our quality systems are registered to ISO standards. Our on-staff engineering department can assist you with product development and provide total technical support. Our knowledgeable sales team members offer superior customer service and are here to answer any questions you may have regarding our products. Having a hard time finding a part? Let our sourcing specialists do the work for you to locate those items. We offer competitive pricing with typically smaller minimums and shorter lead times. To find out more about Buckeye Fasteners, please call us at 800-437-1689 or on the web at buckeyefasteners.com. Buckeye Fasteners, more than just weld.
BTM Manufacturing is a domestic ISO 9001 manufacturer of threaded fasteners and bent wire products. From anchor bolts to studs to U-bolts, BTM is committed to making your per print special with the highest quality standards while meeting your on-time delivery schedule. Since BTM began in 1961, this family-owned business has remained focused on providing exceptional service to their customers. Centrally located in Kansas City, Missouri, BTM recently expanded into a 100,000 square foot facility, which allows for the production and manufacture of many projects simultaneously, both large and small quantity. BTM's website at btm-mfg.com allows you to submit custom quotes quickly and easily, and once you do, a BTM team member will contact you as soon as possible to discuss your needs. Are you ready to get started? BTM is. Visit www.btm-mfg.com today.
Are you tired of empty promises from software vendors? Are you paying for support that you're not receiving? Is it time for another paid upgrade? There is a solution. InSequel delivers quality software designed for the fastener industry at an affordable price with industry-leading support. Unlike other software companies, with InSequel, you purchase your software once. There will never be a paid upgrade. If you need assistance with anything, InSequel is there to help. When you call, you will always speak with a real person offering you quick and knowledgeable answers to your questions. Can your current provider say this? Quality software, affordable pricing, industry-leading support. Only InSequel can deliver all three. So why settle? Call InSequel Software at 877-446-9775 or visit www.inxsql.com.
I know my customers' yearly usage, but I don't have the warehouse space to store it.
Solution Man can. Submit a blanket order, and I'll not only set up release dates, I'll offer you bulk pricing too. Visit the Solution Industries website for details at solutionind.com.
You're my fastener superhero.
Just doing my job, ma'am.
SOLUTION, Solution Industries. We are Solution.
Hi, this is Jackie with Stealthfast in Chicago. You're listening to Fully Threaded Radio.
Brian Musker, Eric Dudas, back with you on the online Fastener Groove Machine.
Groovy, right.
Hey, Bri, I'm glad to see that you just made your arrangements to head out here to the Cleveland area in May for the NCFA Distributor Social. Cool.
Right. Well, it's more than just a distributor social. As you know, a touch of work and a touch of fishing.
That's right. We'll get a little bit of everything in. Of course, the Distributor Social is an annual event. It's been going on about 10 years. Maybe this is the 11th year. And that is May 9th in Independence, Ohio, put on by the NCFA, North Coast Fastener Association. And it's quite an event. If you do head out for it, if you're in the Midwest, we encourage you to do so. You'll get to run into at least 200 or so of your favorite fastener friends. And the day is set up this time with a manufacturer tour. There's a hot forger in town. And then BBI's got an open house midday, all leading up to the big event, which starts at 6 p.m. May 9th. get out to ncfaonline.com.
Good.
A couple other big name celebrities are heading out for this too. Just got word from Carmen Vertullo. He's heading out.
Oh, cool.
This is the news portion of the podcast, everyone. Thanks for clicking into Fully Threaded Radio as usual. There was a big event that happened recently in the fastener industry. We like to touch on all the shows, and we didn't get an opportunity to head out to the Stuttgart show in Stuttgart, Germany. That happened on March 19th through the 21st. But speaking of big names in this industry, we know someone who did make it out, and that is Bryan Wheeler of Star Stainless. He's with us now. Hey, Bryan, thanks for taking a minute out.
Oh, anytime, guys.
Morning. How you doing?
Well, things are going well. Finally back in the swing of things after NFDA, Pac West, Midwest Fastener in San Diego, and segued that right into Germany. And it's good to be home and finally getting some work done.
Yeah, I was glad to see you out there in San Diego, Bryan, and good job on moderating that panel. It was kind of an unruly group you had up there, but I think you did a pretty fine job.
Well, we do what we can. We had some good guys there, and, you know, everyone always has their opinions, and it's good to hear what everyone has to say.
Yeah, right. There's a diverse set of opinions just as well.
The topic that day was the future of fastener distribution, and always a good mix up there. A lot of guys looking down the road, and also a few contrarians, I thought. A few voices that I think want to cling to some of the successful ways that others might not think are more future-oriented. But anyway, it was a good mix, and you did a good job. But let's talk a little bit about the Stuttgart show. This was the 8th International Exhibition and out there, and this is the Mack Brooks show. What were your general impressions of this year's show?
You know, going into that show, it's always larger than life. The booths, the event space, everything is just big, big, big. You know, we think that Vegas, you know, with the booth setups, kind of more of a speed dating, pop into the booth, have a chat with either a customer or a vendor, and kind of moving it along. But it's all about sitting down and spending time at a booth. You know, if everyone could get you for an hour, they'd get you for an hour. So, you know, it's the one show that really is nice to attend, because at 3 days long, you really do utilize all 3 days worth of time. And this was my third one that I had attended, and it's always a really valuable show for me to go to.
So do you think that model would work in America, the idea of this cutting out the speed dating and going into a talking time?
You know, it's hard to say. I really think that, you know, they've got a different model. In that show, you know, everyone who's coming in is coming in only from about an hour and a half to 2 hours away, you know, taking the overseas vendors out of that equation. Yeah. But as far as the distributors go, Europe's much more condensed. It's much easier to travel, and it's much easier to get in and out. So I find the attendance from the various European nations to be a bit higher. So I think for them, you know, it really takes that time. I saw different people at the show each day, and really the second day being the most busy as far as foot traffic from what I noticed.
Speaking of the traffic, what was your impression about it this year? Was it holding steady, increase, decrease?
You know, it's hard to say split amongst the multiple exhibit halls, but I would say it's following the same trend that I noticed at many of the large expos is, you know, attendance starting to really lighten up from where it has been in years past. I think over the course of the last few years and the addition of, you know, different shows, it's really starting to make people just pick and choose and decide, you know, where they're going to go and what they're going to attend. And I think this show was no different.
So do you see, is it a very large contingent from America? I mean, do Americans, I guess, walk the show, you know, looking for new suppliers and things? Is it mainly aimed at Europeans?
I'd say the main focus is probably, you know, the European market, but I did run into some fellow Americans out there, and most of them coming from larger companies that are doing some direct import, or some companies that have multiple overlapping presence both in the U.S. and Europe, as far as having DCs in both countries.
So when you're going to that show, I know the Messe is sort of pretty near the airport, but are there hotels there? I mean, or do you stay in the city?
I stay directly across from the expo center. I find it to be kind of most convenient. Really, the day for us starts with getting downstairs for breakfast, and I probably don't leave the expo center till about 6 p.m. And then it's kind of going right into dinner. So it's a long day, and it's nice to be close. So I typically like to stay close. I do know some other people that I did meet with that were staying downtown. And as far as, if you're going to do dinners and such, downtown has got way more going on than right there by the airport.
Yeah.
What was the big news this year? What was the tone? Was there a story that seemed to be a common thread?
I didn't really have anything this time that really was standing out. I think last year was kind of, or 2 years ago, was a lot about kind of automation, and they did a big tour of the Worth building that was running fully automated. And this year, I didn't really see a common tone that was really carrying throughout the exposition.
I thought you were going to say something about the economy, actually. I thought you were going to say everyone's holding their breath for the bottom to fall out. Like, it seems like everyone's thinking that way around here. And then when they hear anything that's a glimmer of positive news, everybody seems to be happy, but a little doubtful. You didn't get any of that over there, huh?
No, I mean, to be honest, it could just be my personal, because I've been hearing it for some time now. It's been a solid 6 months of going back and forth as far as what's going to happen with China and trade wars. So, for me, it kind of might have been that I'd already heard it. So it wasn't something that was too new. Everyone's always concerned about, where things are going. Business having slowed down a little bit, coming in from a really hot and heavy 2017 and 18, and 19 starting to soften. Right now, I think everyone's kind of focused, looking forward to see, where things are going to go. But it seems as soon as we hear that we've got a plan in mind, something changes. So I think right now everyone's just holding their breath.
For a long time, yeah. And a new trade depositions arrived in China, I see. So who knows what will happen.
I was surprised to hear from some of the Chinese vendors that were there, how much, we think of the China stuff as far as, the additional cost for import, but, they said they're really feeling in their domestic market, some of the reduction in their export because of the demand. So, it is really twofold. We feel what we get here in the U.S., but, they're really feeling it over there too.
As we record this segment, we haven't yet received from Mack Brooks the official numbers. And by the time we put this in the can, Mike McNulty will have those numbers. So the news report's coming up next, and you can get the official numbers. This is always, again, folks, the largest attended show, a fastener show on the planet. So it's always cool to see what those numbers are and follow the leader, so to speak. We've got a bunch of things coming up in the U.S., of course, and one of them is something you're involved in, Bryan Wheeler, and that is Fastener Tech 19. That's coming up in June. MWFA and Fastener Technology team up to put that on. We'll see you there for sure, right?
Most certainly. I'll definitely be there. I'd encourage everyone else to join us there as well.
Yep. Yeah, we've been on that little bandwagon too. Okay. It's a great show.
Now, you're involved with the MWFA, and they have, I think, taken special care this year to co-locate the show with the surface finishers. What benefit do you see of having that co-location happen? I mean, we get a little extra foot traffic, but materially, do you see a benefit there?
I think that there's definitely overlapping business for the two organizations, and it gives people the option and the ability to see both sides. So, we definitely have in the Midwest Fastener Association members of both that, do overlap. So I think it gives everyone a good opportunity to not only see the fastener side of things, but also, some of the other sides for industrial supply and finishing.
Yeah, very cool. Well, that along with the expanded after party and, of course, the golf outing the next day make Fastener Tech 19 a destination anybody within shooting distance should not miss. So very good. We will see you in person out there, Bryan, and we appreciate all your input on Stuttgart, and congratulations on another whirlwind tour of the world. It seems like you have unbridled energy, my friend.
Oh, thank you.
The Fastener News Report's coming up here, folks, and that's sponsored as usual by Volt Industrial Plastics. The title sponsors of Fully Threaded Radio are Stelfast and Brighton Best International. Hey, Bryan Wheeler, we have the Fastener News Report coming up, as we've mentioned a couple times, and you're not really that interested in doing the intro, are you?
I'll leave that one to you, Eric.
Yeah. Well, thanks again for joining us. We're going to get on with it. Bryan Wheeler with Star Stainless. Now with news about screws you can use, here's Mike McNulty.
Thanks, Brian and Eric. This is Mike McNulty from Fastener Technology International Magazine, bringing you the Fastener News Report, which is sponsored by Volt Industrial Plastics, makers of the world's finest plastic fasteners. Tiger Woods is back on top of the golf world. Chief Wahoo is gone from the shores of Lake Erie, and France nearly lost an entire 850-year-old cathedral. But I am still focused on fasteners and ready to deliver today's Fastener News Report. In this episode, Bob Baer of Abbott-Interfast joins us to reveal the latest results of the Fastener Distributor Index, also known as the FDI. Also in today's broadcast, we have our top story on Nautic Partners and Linfast, as well as newsmaker headlines from SFS, Triangle Fastener, The Worth Group, Autobolt, K-Max, and Stanley Engineered Fastening, just to name a few. On the back page report, we're going to talk about the health of the fastener industry. We will get to all of that and the latest FDI results right after this.
There's a reason Volt Industrial Plastics is an industry leader in plastic clip, clamp, and custom fastener manufacturing. With over 100 million parts in stock that can be shipped the same day, Volt has some of the fastest lead times in the industry. Volt can do color. We have the capability of molding over 120 different materials and can color match for specific applications. You need it? We can build it. At Volt, we have state-of-the-art technology to build prototypes to customer specs. And although some companies provide similar products, we offer customer service that's second to none, setting us apart from our competition. And now available, Volt's new light-duty cable clamps. With maximum diameters ranging from 3/16 to a ½ inch, these clamps are ideal for hard-to-reach spaces, electronics, and finish work. They prevent corrosion with metal tubing, and with plastic tubing, they won't bind or warp, preventing leaks while maintaining the flow of liquids. Volt Industrial Plastics, the finest, fastest plastic fasteners in the world. Visit us at voltplastics.com.
ND Industries has been solving customers' toughest problems through innovative technologies, competitive pricing, and industry-leading service since 1955. A family-owned business, ND Industries manufactures and applies fastener locking, bonding, sealing, masking, and assembling products. Their pre-application process makes fasteners ready to use at the point of assembly, resulting in reduced labor costs, time savings, and superior quality assurance. As a fully integrated company, ND handles all aspects of operations, from formulating custom chemical compounds and coating fasteners to providing inline inspection, packaging, and delivery services. ND Industries serves the global market with 13 divisions in the continental U.S. and also facilities in Taiwan, China, and Turkey. Learn more about ND Industries at our website at www.ndindustries.com. ND Industries, innovative technologies, competitive pricing, and industry-leading service. Contact ND today.
You're listening to Mike McNulty's Fastener News Report on Fully Threaded Radio.
The seasonally adjusted FDI for March was a stable 53.0, up slightly versus last month's decelerating reading of 52.5. Fastener Distributor Index data is collected and analyzed by the FCH Sourcing Network, the National Fastener Distributors Association, and Baer. The FDI seeks to identify demand, pricing, and outlook trends within the American fastener distribution industry. To get some insight on these results, we talked to Bob Baer, president of Abbott-Interfast and the treasurer of the MWFA. Hi, Bob. Thanks for joining us on the Fastener News Report.
Hi, Mike. Thanks for having me back, and I appreciate the invite.
Yeah, it's good to have you back. I think it's been a while.
It has been. We've been very busy. Yeah, we've been very busy around here.
Time flies, right?
Yeah, not only here but our industry in general. It's been crazy.
A lot going on. So anyway, let's get into it. What do you think about the latest FDI results?
Well, I'm looking at the chart, and I always like to start out with this on the few times that I've been on the broadcast for the FDI. We have no less than 26 months in a row in the green, as I call it, above the line. 28 of the last 29 above the 50 mark. The only exception to that was 1 month right at 49.9, which I'm really considering at the line. So it's been incredible, just incredible. The Purchasing Managers Index is also at levels not seen since 2016. It's been a great ride. Whether it continues or not, I'm not sure.
Yeah, it has been good. I think we're getting spoiled with it being in the positive. So when it dips down a little bit, we're like, oh, what's going on? But I heard one economist I saw, giving a presentation last month, and he was talking about, we're coming close to the all-time longest expansion in the history of the United States. Now, some people say, well, the GDP hasn't been very high, so it's been kind of a slow expansion, but still, that's pretty darn good.
Yeah, the GDP rate is actually what they would consider to be an ideal rate. I mean, if we can continue growing at 3% a year forever, that's ideal. Of course, that won't happen.
It won't happen.
Right. Sooner or later, we're headed for a bust here. And the 4-month moving average is definitely, it shows a downward line. It shows a trend. And, we're down to levels that we haven't seen in probably a couple of years at the levels we're at.
So still stable in the growth area, which is good news. Maybe on the category of a little bit on the bad news, we saw the forward-looking indicators taking the third straight month of being below 50. What's your take on that? It came in at 46.9 this month, on third straight month of being below 50. What do you think about that?
Well, I think there's a lot of noise around right now about recession and slowdown, and late this year and early next year, and many of the economists talk about next year being a down year. The sales figures also dip below 50. And, I think some part of that is mental. Some part of it is, we're seeing lower numbers. It's still growth, but they're lower. And so you can't help when you report, it's in the back of your mind. And so a lot of this is a reporting function. And I think that's coming into play.
One way I've heard it presented as slowing growth, which is still growth. It's just slower growth than it was the last few quarters, which is still a decent place to be.
Exactly. There's a couple people out there that like to talk about 6 leading indicators. There's jobs, GDP, durable good orders, inflation, the stock market, and interest rates. And if you look over those, I mean, jobs are still very strong. 196,000 jobs added in March. GDP growth is at 2.2%, not as good as last year, but still growth, and it's in that range of what they consider an ideal rate. Durable goods orders are down, probably 0.5%. The latest figures that I saw were January. That would definitely be considered weak, and the only weak thing of the 6, year-to-year inflation is pretty steady. It's just slightly above the Fed target rate of 2%. We're at 2.1. The stock market is healthy. It rebounded from last year's losses. And interest rates, Powell did a 180 here, and he's pulled back on his policy. Doesn't look like they're going to raise them this year. They're steady. So, when you look at the data here, I guess the question is who's worried and why are we worried? But, you have things like tariffs and economists talking and Brexit and those kinds of things come into play.
Right, and the end of the world and from the environmental standpoint.
And the tribe not going to the series, I'm sure on your bucket list that's on there somewhere. Yeah, did you hear the news today? Trump's announced that there's going to be $11 billion on EU products, and so I think the market tanked earlier. It was down a couple hundred points, and it looks like we might have a new trade war on our hands.
Well, yeah, that would cause some uncertainty. On the other hand, anecdotally, when I talk to people, they keep still talking about difficult to hire people, and it's certainly the job market for people in manufacturing or technology or business. It's still, they got the pick of their jobs. I was driving across the state of Pennsylvania. I don't know how many billboards I saw for truck drivers with signing bonuses and things like that. It's just really, those kind of things really point in the right direction. Restaurants are full and People are doing stuff, going to sporting events and all that. So it all looks good anecdotally to me.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that because transportation growth and the truck driver market is exploding. There aren't enough drivers around. Leisure and hospitality, they added like 33,000 jobs last month. Education, health service added 70. Business services added 37,000. Construction added 16,000. The market is super hot still for jobs. One thing I will note is manufacturing actually did lose jobs last month, and retail lost jobs. And we're in that same boat. We're struggling to hire manufacturing people. We can't hire good qualified people. We have to hire and train.
Right.
But a lot of our job growth is in the service sector, and we're becoming a service industry. Manufacturing these days is only about 12% of our economy. And I think you look at the charts, and manufacturing in the U.S. peaked in July of 18 at about 2 to 3% growth, and it's lost momentum ever since. So when you look at the numbers and you look at the sliding scale of our FDI, I think part of that is, in fact, manufacturing is starting to slip, if there is one thing slipping.
Right. And it probably, it depends on sectors and regional things like that, which are going to lead me into going into the respondent commentary. We saw some cautious comments, people looking at seeing signs of slowdown and or leveling off in the upcoming quarters. But then I noted there was a trio of regional comments, including the first one was, my customers say they have a lot of jobs to book, but these are on hold due to rain. And I think it'll get super busy in the next few months. The second one said a shortage of people here in North Carolina will be an issue. And then the last one was talking about we have 3 different locations in different markets, but we found that aerospace, medical, electronics, construction, and robotics are contributing to increased revenue in 2 of our locations. So I think a lot of it's also depends on what sector you're in, as well as it sounds like what region you're in as well could have different expectations.
Yeah, absolutely. I was looking at the housing market actually, and in the South and the Southwest, a few of the areas, the housing market is still doing very well. And again, it's a regional thing. The labor is cheaper in those areas. The land is certainly cheaper in some of those areas like Dallas and Houston, Phoenix. And they're doing very well still, where other areas, new housing has almost come to a halt.
Right. As I noted earlier, I'm still amazed when I hear people talk about not being able to find the right number of workers and get people to pass drug tests and training tests and things like that. You mentioned you're having a hard time getting people. Is it just in the factory or is it also in other areas?
Yeah, we're actually trying to hire in our purchasing department, and we're trying to hire in our factory. We did manage to recently hire some warehouse staff, but even that is a very competitive area right now to get a good warehouse person in. That's the last line of defense before it goes to the customer, we like to call it.
Right.
It's been a difficult thing to hire. And we get a few candidates in, but nowhere near the caliber we used to get. And I think I think people who want to work are working. If they really truly want to work,
right,
they are out there and they are working. And there are still jobs out there to be filled. But, we have everyone has this idea that we should all be going to college these days. And maybe that's starting to turn around a little bit with college debt and people coming out and not getting, the job of their dream after spending $100,000 on college education. There are some industries that are desperate to hire, and they're willing to train, and they pay well.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that's definitely starting to turn, and will turn a little bit more in the years to come, especially when you have these scandals of people paying to get into these elite colleges and the exposing the whole situation there. Yeah, I think there's lots of opportunities for 2-year degrees or no degrees. So.
Mm-hmm. Certainly.
One other anecdote I wanted to mention, I was visiting with some people in another industry. It's a wire and cable industry, but they were talking about lead times on machinery is up over, in some sectors, up over a year, where it had been down to like 6 months. So that's another good sign. And these are people that are dealing on global scale. So it's still a lot going on out there in the industry. So
we see the same thing as far as lead times, not only here, but coming from the Far East, coming from Taiwan and China. Lead times are up. So there's no doubt business is still doing well there, and their machines are just as booked as ours.
All right, good. So it's a good place to still be, and we'll keep on trucking. Can I ask you what's anything new going on at Abbott-Interfast and or the Midwest Fastener Association?
Absolutely. There are always things going on in both of those, actually. Abbott-Interfast. So we recently converted, and we're trying to downsize the number of companies around here. The owners were traditionally started a new company for everything they went into. So we've consolidated a few things, and we've converted all of our companies from corporations to LLCs. And in the interim, we've now Abbott-Interfast LLC has now absorbed a few of the smaller companies, the Nationwide Directory being one of them, which has been around 49 years, I believe this is our year this year. And we're doing some new things with that. We have our book live on our website now. We have some new search functions. And the website's been redesigned. We'll be sending out to our members the entire book on a USB, so that's kind of new. As far as Abbott goes, a little cautioned about the future here, but we're looking at a couple new machines. A few years ago, we dove into the CNC machine market, and our machines are pretty booked up, and we really can't take additional orders without new machines. So
so that goes into your comment about lead times.
Yeah, exactly. And other than that, other than the normal everyday maintenance type things, we're plugging along. As far as the Midwest Fastener goes, we have one of our biggest events coming up, and I know that's also near and dear to your heart, but Fastener Tech 19 is coming up in June, and we're going to have a great show this year. We have the Monday exhibitor move in, Tuesday show. There's some educational seminars on Tuesday as well, and then the show hours on Wednesday. And this year, this time for a little change, we're having a after show party, which is new, with the band called New Direction. And then, of course, the following day is the MWFA's golf outing, largest outing in the industry. And then there are things going on in the fall as well. Ahead of that, May 16th, if you're listening and you're new, we have an educational seminar on print reading, and that's taught by Mike Henry, and he's very good at it. It's a great seminar if you're not familiar with blueprints and you're just jumping into the industry. Get your feet wet.
Yeah, so you got a lot going on with not only with education, networking, trade shows, conferences, all the above. So sounds pretty good.
Yeah, I think we talked a little bit about it earlier, trade shows. There's so many everywhere.
Yeah, there's a lot.
I saw somewhere that somebody published that there are 29 trade shows in the fastener industry this year. So
we can become professional event attendees or something.
There should be a certification class in attending trade shows, that's for sure.
Still good to go out and meet people and see what's going on. You just got to pick your spots. You can't go to 29.
Yeah, exactly. There's nothing like FaceTime, and that's not a plug for Apple either.
Yeah, and it's also, in my opinion, it's always been good. Like when you got an event, you kind of focus your energy. Like we got to get ready for this event. What are we going to be doing new? We're going to planning and that kind of stuff. So it's all good, but it's going to be busy. It's going to be a busy May for us, I think, and hopefully we'll see a good bump in the FDI for April as well.
Yeah, well, we'll hold our breaths. We'll see where it goes, and hopefully this trend will reverse. Love to see it stay above the line.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us. Next time, let's make it less than a year for your next return.
Yeah, well, I think Eric's going to invite us on sometime in June for what I would consider a quote-unquote fun discussion. Seems like usually when I'm on here, I'm talking about numbers. And
well, you are good at bringing the different leading indicators together, bringing that perspective, so we appreciate that.
Well, I appreciate the invite.
Very good. Well, we'll see you at a show.
We'll see you at Fastener Tech in June, I hope.
Definitely. That was Bob Baer. He's the president of Abbott-Interfast and the MWFA treasurer. The FDI number for March was 53.0 versus 52.5 the previous month. Visit FDIsurvey.com to participate in the process and get a detailed PDF copy of Baird's monthly analysis. Now for today's top story. Middle market private equity firm Nautic Partners, LLC, has completed the acquisition of Linfast Solutions Group in partnership with Linfast Management. Headquartered in Blaine, Minnesota, Linfast is a master distributor of specialty fasteners in the North American market, serving national, regional, and local distribution customers through its Lindstrom and Stelfast product brands of metric and imperial fasteners. As a master distributor, Linfast provides an inventory of 130,000 low-volume, slow-moving SKUs, as well as value-added services, including bulk and kit packaging, plating, coating, and guaranteed stock programs. Neil Juergen, CEO of Linfast, and Chris Pierce, Nautic Managing Director, are forecasting improvements from this partnership, which comes on the heels of Nautic's previous fastener industry investment in Endries International, which they sold to MSD Partners last December. Next up, today's Fastener Newsmaker headlines. In acquisition and expansion news, SFS Group has acquired Triangle Fastener Corporation. The Worth Group is building a state-of-the-art R&D center in south-central Germany. Stanley Engineered Fastening has opened a new production facility in Elyria, Ohio. Birmingham Fastener has opened its newest branch, Houston Fastener Manufacturing, in Houston, Texas, and Field Fastener has opened a distribution center in Florence, South Carolina. In personnel news, Auto Bolt Company has added Libby Beatty to its inside sales team. Copa Tool has named Jake Damron to the new post of maintenance manager. The former chief operations officer of the K-Max Group, Jorg Steins, has become the company's new chief executive officer. And Ernest Machine has added Jared Donnelly and Dmitry Kantorovich to its Cleveland, Ohio sales team. In 2019 milestone anniversary news, ISCO Incorporated in Lee's Summit, Missouri is celebrating 45 years in business, while Comar Screw in Niles, Illinois, and Werf Redcar Fasteners in Roanoke, Virginia are both celebrating their 50th anniversaries this year. You can get details on all of these stories and more in Fastener Technology International magazine and the Fastener News Report newsletter. Finally, let's turn to the back page to talk about the health of the fastener industry. They say you can judge a tree by its fruit, so it seems to me that you can also gauge the health of an industry by its events. And if that is true, then I could say that it can be concluded that the fastener industry is pretty strong and pretty healthy right now. Just consider the fastener industry events presented in the first half of 2019. Earlier in the show, we talked about the surging number of fastener exhibitions and meetings, including the recently completed ones in Stuttgart and San Diego, and upcoming ones in Detroit, Atlanta, Rosemont, and Mexico City. We heard good feedback on the joint meeting in California, and we're getting positive reports from last month's Fastener Fair in Germany. More than 12,000 visitors from 90 different countries went to Stuttgart to see 987 exhibitors from 45 different countries in nearly 240,000 square feet of net exhibition space. These numbers are records for the show and represent increases of 3% for visitors, 10% for exhibitors, and 5% for exhibit space when compared to the last staging of the show in 2017. And looking ahead to May and June, Fastener Fair USA, the IFME 2019, Fastener Tech 19, and Fastener Fair Mexico all look good to me on paper. And for people in or close to Ohio, don't forget about the NCFA Distributors Social coming up on May 9th in Independence, Ohio. You can read about all of these events in the pages of Fastener Technology International magazine and the Fastener News Report newsletter, both available in print editions and online at fastenertech.com. This has been Mike McNulty of Fastener Technology International bringing you the Fastener News Report. Please send your news, pictures, comments, corrections, or complaints to me at mcnulty@fastenertech.com.
Up next, the man, the legend, everyone's favorite lifetime honorary Texan, Brian Musker, in a landmark interview. You're not going to want to miss this one, folks. Thanks for listening. It's Fully Threaded. Need fasteners? Fully Threaded Radio listeners know that Stelfast offers over 12,000 fastener items direct from stock, including bolts, cap screws, nuts, screws, and washers in a variety of finishes. per print, specials, and standards, StelFast has been a global sourcing leader since 1972. As an ISO-certified supplier with facilities across North America and Asia, each member of the StelFast team is dedicated to supporting fastener distributors with the highest quality products and service possible. That's why the motto remains, for service you deserve and people you trust, it's StelFast.
Hey mates, Brian Musker. Regardless of the required size, material or finish, Eurolink has the European resources to meet your demands for hard-to-find metric fasteners. We're the one-stop source for all of your metric needs, saving you time and money searching for these parts while fulfilling all of your requirements. How do we do it? Eurolink offers access to more than 100,000 quality C-class parts with the ability to solve your toughest metric fastener supply issues every time. Hard-to-find metric fasteners delivered. Just think of us as your heavy metal rock stars. To learn more about how we can rock your world or request a hassle-free quote online, visit eurolinkfss.com. That's eurolinkfss.com.
Well, hi, everybody. Welcome to the Fastener Training Minute, coming to you from the Fastener Training Institute and AIM Testing Laboratory in beautiful El Cajon, California. Today's topic has to do with an important fastener standards update relating to fastener plating specifications. This is big news and actually historic information, and you need to know about it. So when we return, you'll learn more about this brand new fastener standards update regarding plating.
Thanks, Carmen. This is Joe Morris with the Fastener Training Institute. We are well into spring, and the Fastener Training Institute is full of training events and webinars. On May 3rd, we will present the webinar, Introduction to Coiled Spring Pins, instructed by Mike Lentini from Spiral International. This presentation will provide an overview of how you can improve the quality of assemblies, extend the life of products, and reduce manufacturing costs through designing coiled spring pins into assemblies. Then on May 14th in Los Angeles, California, we have fastener manufacturing plant tours, where you're going to get an up-close look at fasteners being made. We will visit R&D Fasteners, Risco Manufacturing, and Mr. Washerman. This class is part of our Certified Fastener Specialist series, yet absolutely anybody can attend. Then on May 17th, we're presenting another webinar, My Major Customer Has a Quality Concern, Now What? Instructed by Don Metcalf from Peak Innovations Engineering. In this webinar, we will cover quality issues and how to strengthen customer relationships through challenging situations. We're going to discuss the areas to focus on to ensure that you're ready when a customer complaint is received. This includes your product, processes, and customer relationships. Then lastly, we are headed to Fastener Fair in Detroit, Michigan to present Fastening 101, including automotive fasteners, instructed by Lawrence Klaus. This one-day class is truly a must for anyone in the fastener industry, users, purchasers, engineers, and sales. We're going to explore fastener engineering basics, automotive fasteners, how parts are made, trends in automotive, and their impact on fasteners. This is truly a class that you don't want to miss. Our webinar and class schedules are posted on our website at fastenertraining.org. We are still looking for webinar sponsors, so please take a peek at the schedule and consider this a way to support FTI and fastener training. Now back to Carmen for our Fastener Training Minute.
Well, welcome back, everybody. This is Carmen Vertullo again with your Fastener Training Minute. Today's topic is an important fastener standard update, and that standard is ASTM B633, which is actually not a fastener standard. It's a plating standard for zinc electroplating, and it's actually not even a fastener plating standard, and we'll explain that in a minute. Well, as you know, most of you who use or specify plating for fasteners, ASTM B633 has been the prolific standard that has been used for all kinds of zinc electroplating over the years. It's not ideal for fasteners. So in the year 2000, the ASTM Committee F16 on fasteners developed a new plating specification specifically for fasteners. and that was ASTM F1941 to help solve the problems associated with B633 when it's used for fasteners. Since then, F1941 has been continually improved, and we now have F1941/F1941M 2016, which is the definitive specification for electroplating fasteners, and it includes metric fasteners as well. So I'll just say out of the gate that F1941, F1941M should always be used for electroplating fasteners. Don't use ASTM B633. Now, unfortunately, in addition to not being well suited for plating fasteners, ASTM B633 has changed for the worse over the years. Primarily, B633 changed the requirement for hydrogen embrittlement relief baking to require pre- and post-baking of steel parts above HRC 31. That's Rockwell C31. Research has shown for some time now that only steel parts above HRC 39 are susceptible to electroplating-induced hydrogen embrittlement, and that's the requirement for baking in F1941. Now, the problem for us fastener suppliers is that many older drawings and specifications refer to ASTM B633 for electroplating fasteners, and that's a problem because it's not ideal. A lot of time and money has been wasted in unnecessarily baking electroplated parts when B633 is the call-out. Well, the good news is this. After many years of work and countless meetings and ballots, ASTM Committee B08 on coatings, which I serve on, has approved a change to that spec to require baking only on parts above HRC 39, in line with ASTM F1941, 1941M. So the next time you look at B633, the newer version will reflect that change. This is an important change for suppliers, platers, and end users alike. For the informed fastener user, it will save a lot of money and energy and provide shorter lead times. In any case, we should still always use ASTM F1941, F1941M as the specification for electroplating fasteners, even when ASTM B633 is called out. Now, you might say, how can I use ASTM F1941 when B633 is the call out? Well, the authoritative reference for doing that is in the introduction to ASTM F1941, F1941M, where it says, quote, this standard shall be used in place of ASTM B633 for mechanical fasteners. Now, if you're a supplier and your customer calls out ASTM B633, be sure they are informed and concur, and they'll know that their certification will read ASTM F1941, F1941M. Now, if you have any questions on properly translating an ASTM B633 plating designation to an ASTM F1941, F1941M designation, AIM Testing Laboratory is happy to help you with that, and we're easy to get a hold of at info@aimtestlab.com. Well, the bottom line is this. ASTM B633, the problem is solved, but don't use it for fasteners. Use ASTM F1941, F1941M. And many thanks to our fastener professionals, especially Salim Brahimi, who serves on both the ASTM F16 and B08 committees for working to this solution. This has been Carmen Vertullo with your Fastener Training Minute. Thanks for listening.
Hi, this is Dave, the voice of Buckeye Fasteners and Old Rusty Gold Beer, the preferred beer of the traveling salesman. And you are listening to Fully Threaded Radio.
We interrupt your regularly scheduled broadcast in order to bring you a long-awaited interview with Brian Musker, part of the FTR team, Brian and Eric. Usually Brian is on the side of getting to ask the questions, and today we're going to be asking Brian some questions. And this is Marty Nolan with RL English Company, and it's my extreme pleasure to have this opportunity to interview Brian. Hello, Brian. How are you?
Doing good. You missed out the fact that I'm the Texas component of the Eric and Brian duo, okay?
Oh, we're getting to the Texas component. That's coming.
Oh, okay.
But first of all, I want to acknowledge that you did a recent interview with the traveling salesman in Fastener Technology International magazine. And
I remember that. Yeah, I remember it well, actually.
And while I'm sure many people have read the interview, there's a few of the points that I'm going to cover once again, just so you can elaborate on those and maybe give us some further insights, because it was a short piece.
Yeah, I've met I met the traveling salesman a few times. It's usually behind potted palm trees at the Las Vegas show, but I have met him a number of times.
I have too. I find him insufferable. The ego on that gentleman is incredible. But
I do too.
Again, we'll edit that out, I'm sure.
Right. Well, we could leave it in.
But that being said, I also took an opportunity when I realized I was going to have this chance to interview you to get some questions from some other interested listeners. So I'm going to touch on a few topics that, while I may not be that familiar with, many of your listeners are familiar with them. So we'll do a little history. We'll talk about the present, and we'll take some questions from the audience that I've already assembled. So you ready?
Yep, cool. Okay.
Okay, let's start with some very basic questions about Fasteners Clearinghouse, fully threaded radio. One of the things I was able to easily find on your website, your first broadcast was March 18th, 2010.
Yeah, it's a while ago now. You're right.
And just to remind you, because I thought it was funny to go and look, your first guests were Mike McGuire, Andy Pells, and you did a interview with Rob Lucas and Larry Thomas from Shanghai, China. So that part I was able to track. Let's talk a little bit about Fasteners Clearinghouse, because that seems to be an area where you do an enormous amount of work and your partner Eric does basically nothing.
Watch out.
You'll edit that out, of course.
You better be careful of it. Yeah.
You'll edit that part out too, right?
Right. I'll make sure of that.
Okay. But going to the topic of Fasteners Clearinghouse, did you begin that about the same time as you began Fully Threaded Radio, or when did Fasteners Clearinghouse first go online? When did you start that up, roughly?
We started, about 2007, I think. And we had started, I guess, developing Fasteners Clearinghouse probably at the end, but late 2006. And we, Eric and I formed a company, 17, 18 years ago. And really it was a web-based company. And we specialized sort of initially in like web design, creating websites all based on an IBM Domino platform. But it sort of became a pain in the neck because we had to keep looking for business, and we didn't really want to do that. Eric looked for the business, and so we started looking around really for some company that would have some recurring revenue. And by about 2006, we had some very good contracts at that time. It became more apparent to us that the future to us lay somewhere else, and so we started really looking around. And then, we found this book. Our specialty at that time was really providing search engines based on this technology, web technology, for companies in Chicago, including a couple of banks. Okay, so we were building internal searches for them, or search abilities. And so it became clear to us that the problem was the fact you couldn't search on this book, And so we thought we can do that. So we then set about to basically discontinue our other business and cancel our existing, so some of them long-term contracts, while we worked on how we're going to build this business related around fasteners, okay?
So you basically stumbled onto fasteners by finding that book.
Sort of, in a way. Not quite as simple as that, but it's essentially that. We looked at this book and realized that we had a way of making this book work, okay?
Gotcha. Part of your interest in fasteners, or one of the things I think is you had familiarity with fasteners. You had familiarity with you had an engineering background.
Well, I had an engineering degree, and also, if you grew up on a farm, basically you're faced with fixing things. Everything you do is mechanical, because you can't just take your tractor to the local, repair shop to have things fixed. Tractors on farms break continuously, and so you either go broke or you watch your father fixes tractors and Caterpillar tractors and trucks. All these things have to get fixed. So I just fell into, I guess, being interested in mechanical things from growing up on a farm. And I went through engineering school. And in fact, my first ever project, when if you have to do 1,200 hours of practical work in an engineering company in order to get your degree. One of them was with the Department of Scientific Industrial Research in New Zealand, doing a study on what impact did the production of a screw thread, In other words, what things on the machinery affected the actual thread itself. So first thing I ever did was to do with screw threads.
So this was destiny from a young man. You were destined to spend the rest of your working days in the fastener industry.
Oh, God, if I had known it then, what would I have done?
You would have run. Okay, because I want to go in a couple different directions here. First, I'm going to go back to your early work experiences. And you and I have talked online or offline a few times about some of your other enterprises before you got involved, even working with Eric, and we'll cover that in a bit. But you were involved with some very interesting projects for the Australian government, I believe.
Yeah, that was sort of when I was in America, and I got called back to Australia. And basically the company I worked for then was a big multinational based in Sydney in Australia, and that we put in fire protection stuff around the world. In fact, we built it. And also we did the fire protection for the US Navy. So our company was one of three companies that formed a conglomerate to build submarines for the Australian government.
So the Australian government felt comfortable with you helping to build submarines for their country.
Well, it had Americans doing it too. There were people, and some Swedish people. There were three companies, and I was in my office in Dallas, that's where our headquarters in America were, and sitting there one Friday afternoon, and actually Thursday afternoon, and the boss our worldwide boss called me from England, and he said, I thought you need to be in Sydney on Sunday morning. And I sort of said, I can't. I'm going for a float trip down the Snake River with friends. And he said, no, you need to be in Sydney on Sunday morning. And it was one of these cloak and dagger things. The contract had not been signed. We were all in secret. I had no idea. He just said, you're going to fly to Sydney. And 8 o'clock on Monday morning, you go to have breakfast in the Manly Pacific, and you're going to find a man there named Jim something or other, and he's going to tell you what you're doing. So thinking, I'm in a different universe. Something's happened here.
I would say so.
Yeah. So we were sequestered in the top floor. They took over the whole top floor of the Manly Pacific, and then they told us what's going on. We were not allowed to move out of that until the contract was signed in case anyone found out. So we were there for basically a week and a half, stuck on the top floor. You couldn't go anywhere. And then, so this contract was the biggest contract in Australia's history. It was in 1987 dollars. It was $9.5 billion. And of the people brought back there, we'd all been brought back from different countries in the world. And my job was to head up all the IT on that enterprise.
And you said this was 1987. So IT in 1987 versus what we are accustomed to today is night and day.
Well, it's pretty wild. In fact, 1987, trying to create a network of two little mini computers, basically IBM PCs, was difficult. And you had Apple's running this thing like Apple Talk, and you could put like 5 or 6 of them together. And my American boss, I remember telling me, he said, you are never going to create a network of all these things unless you put in Macintoshes, because you can't teach everyone fast enough. So we went from the 14 of us who were the top managers of the project, 14 to 4,000 in 2 years, and then 6,000 in 3 years.
Was that 6,000 people or Macintosh?
People and 6,000 Macintoshes. So we became the biggest network of Macintoshes in the Southern Hemisphere in 1 year, and we networked them all, which was pretty much a miracle at that time. And our network included a special secure link through the conglomeration of the US Navy run satellite to Sweden, where the submarine was being designed. So there was a lot of, and also the prime consultants on the contract were Bath Iron Works.
Okay.
And the contract was run very ably by Chicago Bridge and Iron, who'd been brought in because their expertise was welding the shells for the submarines, some of which were being built in America. And they built the nuclear containment vessels. So they had a lot of experience in welding shells.
Does the Australian government still keep tabs on you at this point? I would. I'm just saying I
No,
would.
it does.
Let me jump.
No,
Go
but
ahead.
while the thing was being built, we were prohibited from flying over communist airspace, which in 1987 covered a decent part of the world. So the only way of getting to Sweden was flying through America, backwards and forwards, because you couldn't fly from like Bahrain to London because you're flying over communist space.
That's almost otherworldly. Now let me ask you this. So when you're in 1987 buying 6,000 Macintosh units, does Steve Jobs deliver them personally? Because that had to be a huge order at that time in the computer industry.
Well, no, Steve Jobs, actually, to my great loss, Steve Jobs was no longer working for Apple in 1987, okay? However, it was significant enough that my boss and I were invited to Apple's headquarters in Cupertino. At that time, the guy running Apple was John Scully,
right,
ex-CEO of Pepsi. And so we were invited over for a week in Apple's development center, the so-called the Skunk Works. And my boss, who was a great man, Axel White he had never quite met anyone like these people from Apple. I knew what they were going to be like. But the guy who was the second man down in Apple spent a whole day with us, and his office was a typical Apple office, totally matte black. The whole office was black, one light in it, and a great big galvanized iron trash can in the corner of the room. Apple, I had to warn Axel, and I said, Axel, you don't say anything, okay? So this guy led us around. He showed us things that Apple was doing. I mean, we were relying on some Apple technology in the submarine.
Sure.
And they showed us what Apple was working on that was 15 years in the future. In fact, stuff what we saw in 1987, Apple released in like 1999.
That's interesting.
Some of it, the connectors that are in laptops now, the little thing called a Firewire P1394, whatever it is, Apple developed that in 1987. And where they showed us computers running using that network in 87. A lot of other things.
That had to be a high exposure project. So who else did you meet while working on this kind of project?
Well, it was one of these things where if someone, said, here's a blank check, go and spend as much money as you like. That was basically what my expenditure was, over the time, but initially was about 30 million. And I had to spend it. And it was no choice that you couldn't spend it because the funding for the corporation was based on milestones. So when I put the first computer that we put in was a big VAX 11780 digital. It was a terrible machine, okay? Cost us like $2.5 million, biggest one in Australia, ran like a pig. Immediate funding, 20 million. Just straight in, just by buying that thing, that was the funding. Then I replaced that with what was the first parallel computer that was allowed to be installed outside the US. So I had to go to the US Air Force. I had to get approval. They had to give me approval to have this thing shipped out of America because it was only allowed to be in American soil. So we put in this giant parallel processor because the whole database for the submarine was running on Oracle. Biggest license for Oracle ever released. We were invited over to go and have lunch with Larry Ellison because everyone had to walk past his Ferrari, which was parked right outside the front door of the building to get into the building.
So is this how you got accustomed to working with Eric, is having to work with other difficult people? That's what you're suggesting?
Eric was easy to work with.
Okay, I just thought I was just guessing there. Okay.
And then I met Bill Joy. He was then at that time one of the two owners of Sun Microsystems. Bill Joy, the two of them, Steve McNeely, is that right? They were fascinating, amazing people. They showed us stuff that Sun was doing with basically 3D orientation of, I guess, the closest thing to virtual reality that could have existed in 1987, okay? Manipulating things because we were using Sun's first thing I should say, this contract was the first contract for a military vehicle in the world that was let with the requirement that all the documentation had to be electronic. And so everyone sat waiting to see how in the hell are they going to do this? Previous ships in America, all over the world, so-called DDGs, designed by Bath Ironworks, 37 tons of documentation on every single ship, right? And submarines had paper documentation of that much too. So rather than having 37 tons of paper sitting in somewhere in a submarine, if you could do it electronically, you save weight.
Right.
And that was a requirement. So we had to work out how we're going to do that. And we worked on, I made a demo using a very early version of an Apple product called HyperCard that showed that you could click on pictures and you could link to other things, documents or pictures. So that was based on Apple's work with, I guess, the early versions of how the internet was going to work. The idea that you could have a link that had a line under it, that was embedded in this whole system. So you could click on things and you could get deeper into them. And that was considered pretty interesting. So we had visitors from, I had deputation from the US Air Force, came out to see this, and the US Navy to work out how could you do this? How is this going to work?
So they were coming to you to look from the US military to see what you were doing on this Australian project.
Yeah, not me particularly. I mean,
but
we
your
were
group.
As a group. Yeah, the group, yeah, because it was not considered known how you would do this. Think about it, the web didn't exist till 5 years after this.
Interesting, yeah.
1903, yeah. So, but the mechanism of how the clickable links it was already in theory. There was no means of making it work yet.
Yeah.
So the documentation was all done using a thing called Special Generalized Markup Language, SGML. That was the forerunner of HTML, what HTML was based on. So we've made a few lucky decisions. So the documentation, of course, ended up being based on a web-based system because that's how we did it. Could have made a wrong decision. It would have been a bit of work. Okay.
So, Brian, you mentioned quickly and briefly that you are an honorary Texan, and I said that we would circle back around to that. And I've heard you guys talk about that on your program. Clearly, you have a Boston accent, so I don't understand the connection to Texas. But of course, I'm joking, and I know that you were not raised in Texas or Boston or Chicago. So I wanted to circle back and start at the beginning. You are from New Zealand, and if I'm not mistaken, you grew up on a sheep farm. Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct. That's a true, what they call a dinky-die New Zealander, okay?
A
sheep
what?
Farm, a dinky-die, true, honest.
Okay.
Goodness, okay? And so, in fact, the New Zealand I grew up in was a little bit different to the New Zealand that's there now, but sports at school were compulsory, and in the winter you played rugby, and in the summer you played cricket. I hated cricket. But in rugby, every Thursday we'd take off to the little surrounding schools, and if you lived on a farm, it means the schools were only all grades up to high school would be all in one crowd of about 100 people at a school max, say 80. And we used to go playing rugby. One of the places I played rugby, it was I came to recognise when they showed Lord of the Rings in the Shire, that was within a mile of where that was filmed.
That's awesome. I'm a big fan, so that's cool.
Oh, it's exactly. In fact, that part of the movie is the only part of the set that was never removed, is the actual Shire itself. So, and, when I grew up in New Zealand, New Zealand was a total social welfare society, which is probably cool if you're a kid. If you're growing up and paying taxes, it's not quite so good. So when I grew up, every single thing was covered totally by the government. Every visit to a doctor was free. Every visit to a hospital was free. All medicine prescribed was free. And education was free. Sounds like what everyone dreams for in the Democrat Party in America. And it had some good things. The problem is that it sort of led to a country of hypochondriacs. I mean, there's no consequence of getting sick and just rushing off to the doctor. Everyone rushes off to the doctor. You mean you've got a cold, you could go to the pharmacy or chemist shop and you'd buy a bottle of NyQuil, but it's cheaper to go to the doctor and get him to prescribe it, and then it was free. So the hospitals became full of these massive waiting lists of people trying to have all sorts of operations. So if you really were sick, you had trouble getting into them. And then by the 70s, things were having a problem. I mean, at that time, we were paying about 65% tax to keep all this running. It still wasn't enough. And then they brought in a means test so that if you had a bit of money, you couldn't have any of these free services. You had to pay for them over and above all the taxes you'd been paying. And by 1980, I think it was 4, it's a very good date for things to fall apart, the whole system collapsed and the country actually went bankrupt. And just the weight of the health insurance or the health system had collapsed everything. So the New Zealand of now is you have to have medical insurance and you have to pay to go to school, and it's the way most other countries are.
That's interesting because I don't know anything about New Zealand politics or any of that that you just described. Just wasn't on my radar screen, but that had to be a traumatic period for people transitioning off of the government assistance, and that had to be just huge upheaval.
Well, I was actually, and I'm sure it was, I wasn't living in New Zealand then. I'd already moved to Australia. Actually, I'd moved to America by then. But everything was in a total chaos for a few months until the government worked out how to actually resurrect things so that hospitals could work and all sorts of things. It was a giant mess.
Does it resemble a lot of there's several European countries we hear about, unsustainable debt? Does that remind you of the New Zealand that you left?
Yeah, I mean, it was the same. I mean, the reality is New Zealand is a amazingly picturesque country, but it was, a little bit, it's like many of the British, I guess the British government system, it seems to end up becoming sort of social welfare. I mean, if you think about it, you've got Australia, which is sort of like that, a little bit more free market, Canada, England's the same. And I mean, they all had the same government system. It's the so-called Westminster system, and it must lead to that.
And you and Eric do share some of your politics. You tone it down sometimes, and it fires up other times. But I suppose a lot of that is you're a young man watching all these events take place. It certainly has to affect your views on current politics and how you see the world. Having that as an example to look back on. Yeah,
I lived through it. I mean, it's the same as, people's complaints about the government are the same as anywhere in the world, the same as here. Right. No matter how high the taxes were, nothing ever useful ever got done. The roads still had holes in them and all sorts of things. Right.
Well, let me talk a little bit too. I don't know if this is in personal conversations that you and I have had, but I knew you had an interest in getting to the United States, and you talked how you had a plan to get there. Tell me a little bit about that. Was that just wanderlust and you were a young man wanting to get to the States, or were you wanting to get away from things in New Zealand? What was the process that brought you to the United States?
Good question. People who grow up in New Zealand or Australia basically are on the opposite end of the world. And so what is a very common thing for people once they get out of university, they either might work for a couple of years, but what they do is they suddenly drop everything and take off around the world. It's called OE, overseas experience. So they get all the traveling out of their bloodstream, and then they settle down and work for the next 40 years, okay? Quite different to America, where people basically come straight out and start working, and then they travel when they're old and they can't really enjoy it.
Right.
So New Zealanders and Australians are known for traveling. So I did my traveling. I did a lot of traveling. I just suddenly dropped everything, to my parents' enormous horror and regret. Took off by myself, and I met up with a group of people in Chile, and we traveled around South America for a year and a half, and then came back, got my job, and everything was fine. But I came to the view that there was a problem, which is that New Zealand society at that time, my sister will tell me I'm totally wrong, but it was based really on the old boys network, who you know. So you could be, no matter how smart you were, how much you achieved in New Zealand, you would be basically not eligible to join the businessman's club if you didn't go to a certain school, or if your family didn't have a knighthood somewhere in it, okay? Probably exists similar in Britain even now, but in New Zealand it was very like that. And I came to view that it was a problem because no matter how good I got at what I was doing in my computers, and I considered I was very good, I was limited by the fact that I grew up on a farm, and we certainly didn't have any knighthoods in our family anywhere, okay? And I had already come to learn that the country that you could probably achieve anything in as long as you work hard enough was America. So I set to a plan with my the CEO of our company, and I was going to put a new computer system. He said, "You make this work, I'll make sure you get to America." And so started a 6-year plan that involved me transferring to the head office in Sydney, installing new systems there, and then finally being transferred to England, to Manchester to wait for my work visa, and then being sent to Dallas, which was the headquarters of the new set of American companies that we were building. So I came to America because I came to realize, even as a young guy in New Zealand, that this was the country where you could achieve anything. You're not bound by your birth.
That's a good story.
And I still think I'm right.
I think you're right, too. You're a real example of somebody chasing that and coming to America. For you, it was the American dream because of the limitations you felt you had in New Zealand. That's very interesting. Let me ask you real quickly, too, when you came to Texas, who did you work for? What was your company that you were with?
Right. It was the same company I worked for in New Zealand. It was a big multinational based out of Sydney in Australia, and it was built fire protection equipment and installed them in buildings and ships and things, and was the largest manufacturer and installer of sprinkler systems in the world. There was an American equivalent which was limited only to America because it was part of the breakup of ITT. That was Grinnell, that later on came to buy our company, okay?
So you are in America at this point. I do have one other question. I saw you went to the University of Auckland.
Yeah.
What was your mascot? Were you the Flying Kangaroos, or what was
No.
You said you were involved in sports. You had to be. So.
No, by then I'd given up sports. I mean, I'm simply not good enough to be. I mean, New Zealand is very, very, very competitive in its sports. It's very proud of its national team, rugby team, which is called the All Blacks. So you have to be dedicated to be at that level of sports, okay? I mean, when you're at university, it's hard to study and devote the time to be, it's not quite like the American system. You don't get paid to play sports in New Zealand.
Well, I could spend 2 hours listening to your background, and I'm always fascinated on the show. I tell people there's only 2 people I ever knew in the world that knew something about everything. You are one. My father-in-law, who has passed, was the other. Any topic, you bring it up, and you have a basis point from which to discuss it. And
no, that a little bit. It's not quite like that. I was lucky. I was very lucky at a time in my life. Okay, time was people go through these periods. Certain times you have all the tools and you're very creative and you achieve interesting things. Okay. And other people who are equally bright or even brighter don't have the environment that allows them to flower, and so they don't get that chance. That's all. I was lucky. I had that chance.
Well, you made the most of your luck at the same time, so we'll give you some credit and accept your humble opinion of it as well. But I don't want to spend the entire time in that history period.
Yeah.
So I want to move it forward. No, I love listening to it myself, but I want to keep things moving to an extent because, again, as we started off, you were involved in this and you touched on some of the businesses that you and Eric had in the early days, but you did not explain how you and Eric ran into each other and became what we in the fastener industry now know as Brian and Eric. So tell us a little bit of background. Where did you two meet? How'd you link up and decide that you should be doing projects together?
Right. Okay. Well, so part of this actually goes back to the work on the submarine. One of the prime companies involved in the consortium was Chicago Bridge and Iron. And so when I left the project, I didn't want to spend my life there, though I could have. I wanted to get back to America because I had already decided I wanted to live in America. I needed a green card, and I'd already applied for one when I was sent back to Australia, so that all got cancelled. So I came back to America. Then I got sent off, so they started applying for the green card. I got sent straight off to Germany, and my green card was all active, all that sort of stuff. I ended up coming back from Germany. I decided to leave the country. I couldn't stand the travelling anymore. So by 1994, I think I was back in Dallas, and then I got a phone call from the guy who was my boss from the Submarine Corporation, who was Axel White. He's back in America. He's one of the 3 presidents of Chicago Bridge and Iron. And he said, Brian, we're going through this thing called re-engineering. I guess early, mid-90s, that was the thing, re-engineering the corporation. They wanted to re-engineer the whole IT group within Chicago Bridge and Iron, and he offered me the job of doing that. So my job was to pick up people in the company who I thought could handle this big change that the company wanted to go through. So I was in Oak Brook in Chicago one day walking along the hall, and for whatever reason, I heard this guy talking about something that was to do with a dial-up modem. Now, my impression at that stage of all the IT people I had met in Chicago Bridge and Iron was that dial-up modems you never talked about them because the only thing you could possibly use was an IBM terminal. And so I thought, oh shit, here's someone who actually knows something about the real world. And that person turned out to be Eric, and I had him taken out of his job and assigned to the re-engineering project. And I got to know Eric for, after that very well. And then one stage I went back consulting back in Germany for some years, and then said to Eric, we got to form a company, okay? We need to get into this web stuff. So we formed that company, I guess, technically in like 1998 or something. I think the company was formed in Texas.
That's an awesome story. So his radio voice, even back then, caught your attention, as it does all the Fastener listeners today.
That's right. Just walking down a hall in a building. Okay.
That's awesome. Well, I know too. I did a little research, not too much, because I didn't want to spend that much time on you or Eric. But I did know he had a liberal arts degree, so I think he then went on and studied programming. And he's always been a good talker. So whatever you heard caught your attention and caused you to partner.
Yeah, we formed a good. I mean, Eric and I and there a number of other people. Well, there was some great people. Chicago Bridge and Iron was a great company, okay, and we had some really good talent. It was full of engineers, so it had a fairly conservative overall tinge to it, okay, and that's what the managers were trying to overturn, okay. It was a good company. On a different owner now, but it was in those days. It was known all around the world.
Well, that's interesting, and I'm going to, as I fast forward slowly, I did look back at your article in Fastener Technology, and you talked about one of your early projects with Eric, or one of your projects was doing online pizza ordering system for a Chicago pizza chain. And it occurred to me that you guys dabbled in a lot of these same types of business, or not same types of business, very different business, but it was all based on your idea that I guess eventually led to Fastener's Clearinghouse. It's manipulating data or simplifying data and making it user-friendly, correct?
Well, yes. I mean, I can remember Eric, and Eric would know because he was part of this. I remember giving a presentation back in like 1994 in Oak Brook, and I was trying to show people that there was a new world that opened up. The web existed then, okay? There were something like 20 websites in existence that you could get to, mainly CERN and Edwards Air Force Base. I always remember that. That was the easiest one to get to. But there was not really, and some of the universities, MIT I think you could get to, but there was very few. There was not really a big, at that stage, there was no search engine running properly. And we were really trying to work, how do we deploy some of the software to people in remote locations? And my view was that we were going to be able to do it based on these screens, because we'd be able to put pictures of these things on the screens. And I remember giving this demo, which was like a resounding failure, because the IT department, first of all, the only thing that ran a browser was a Macintosh in 1994, because the browser was written down, the first browser was written at the Supercomputing Center in Champaign-Urbana, okay? And it ran on a Macintosh only in those days. So I had a Mac, of course, and I ran this demo on a Mac. It was completely underwhelming to everyone in the IT department because they couldn't stand the sight of a Macintosh. And so they told them this was the biggest failure of all time. No one was ever going to use this thing called the web. This is what I was fighting against. So
sure.
But in those days it was Lotus Notes, it became IBM. They developed the ability to make websites out of these little notes databases that we built. So it became a very interesting enabling technology. And we actually worked a lot on how would you show this information. I mean, sometimes you'd restrict it dramatically, but overall, the idea of trying to order a pizza on a web was pretty radical. the most radical thing really was that the method of paying for it was like, it was not impossible that any ordinary company could actually go through the mechanism of getting approval to achieve money, to get money over the web. You know, so Eric and I, with our little company, I mean, we ran our company actually out of an apartment complex because it was easiest, because we had, you know, the 3 bedrooms we could turn into offices, and we had showers, and everywhere we could go to the gym and then go straight to the office, have a shower, and then could work. It was perfect.
So that was your first corporate headquarters of...
Yeah, it was. It was great.
It's a good scheme.
The problem was we had to prove, when we went to try and get approval to process the credit cards, we had to prove that we were a company of great standing, not one of those silly little, you know, 2-man companies. So the company that did approval for credit cards expected to find us in one of the big high-rises downtown in Chicago. They did not expect us to have to come out to an apartment complex.
So back then it wasn't good enough to just say, we're Brian and Eric. Don't you get it?
Oh,
we're Brian and Eric. Because that works in our industry today.
Yeah, I know, but it was terrible then. This is like, I guess 1999, 2000, we had this running. And so we had to start the approval process in like 1999. It was a nightmare. We finally got approved. We had to have a sign made up, especially so we could stick on the wall of our apartment so we could have our pictures taken next to the great big sign of our company logo.
What was the name of the company at that point?
It still exists. GaltNet, actually.
GaltNet, sure.
The Galt came from John Galt.
Right,
and
from Atlas Shrugged.
All of the original programs that we did, including the early programs for Fasteners Clearinghouse, always had in the copyright line that people never see, the meta tags in the start of the code, always was either John Galt or Francisco de Anconia.
Very good, yeah. You didn't go with the who is John Galt, you just used the John Galt.
The John Galt. Actually, Eric still will sometimes, he will still refer to me in the terms we used to use out of that book.
That's
it's
funny.
Sort of weird. Yeah. So, but that was our dream of forming the company, was based on, I guess, reading Atlas Shrugged.
Yeah. Well, it's an influential book, although I will tell you, I one time had a cousin, and she was communicating on Facebook, I think, and she had never read the book. And I said, I like the book a lot, no matter where it's gone from its original intent, people sometimes taking it in the directions for their own political views, which is fine. Right. They can do that. But I just said, I really like the book. And she finally read it, and she said, if I'm to be honest, I think you're just really hot for Dagny Taggart. And I said, oh, totally. Yeah, you nailed it. That's pretty much the character in there. So anyways, if someone's not read that, for Dagny Taggart alone, it's worth the read. But that is funny because I still know you guys have some of your emails will be, referenced Galt. So, and I think when I first met Eric, I said, I didn't realize that had any bearing on that email address, but I said, as in John Galt. He looked at me and said, yes, exactly. So like, oh, okay, I get it.
Well, that's still the name of our company, GaltNet. I mean, our DBA is fastenersclearinghouse.com.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I've read that book more times than any other book, just between to share that with you.
Yeah, well, that was an interesting thing. Actually, when we started our company, shortly after we started, Eric wrote an article for Distributors Link. It was called Lost Gold Found by Francisco de Anconia. Now, I'm sure no one except Eric and I reading Distributors Link would have made the connection to Francisco de Anconia.
If I recall, I would have. I would have been the third person.
It was cool. So that carried on for a fair while, the Francisco thing.
That's a good thing.
Yeah, there's still probably code that has attribution to Wyatt as part of its copyright holder too, even today.
Oh, that's funny. That's funny. Okay, I don't want to dwell on this topic too much, but I have to ask you about the scrubber. I couldn't talk with Brian Musker and not ask about the scrubber. In your article in Fastener Technology, you did a pretty nice job of describing what the scrubber does. But for those people that did not read it, tell me a little bit about the scrubber, because by all indications, that is a make or break part of Fastener's Clearinghouse.
So let's go back. The origin of the scrubber, okay? Well, we should go back to the absolute origin of Fastener's Clearinghouse. And we sort of, you get all these things when your company starts up, it's a little bit like you have a chicken and egg problem. You have to appear like you're a big company, but you're not really, because you haven't convinced enough people that you're big. And so it's not like there used to be this ad on TV where this little few guys started this company, and the moment they started it, suddenly were overwhelmed with orders. Well, we didn't have that problem starting off. We really knew that we had to have our site had to be public before we could really start telling people to list stuff. So Eric and I were sort of working out how many fasteners did we really have to have online before we allowed the search to run. Well, it had to be more than like 20,000, because you couldn't have it so that someone would do a search and not find anything. So we made it so that the scrubber, not the scrubber.
Valid point.
Right. So the search was opened wide out into fuzzy logic. You could search for a washer and we'd give you screws, okay, because you had to give answers back. So we went live, I guess, I don't know when it was, like April or something in 2007, and we might have had 20,000 lines up. But don't know, and I've forgotten how we talked people into giving us these lines. And so one of the first of the people who decided to list stuff with us was a company still with us. Kevin Henning is at Quality Component Supply. And I remember this because it was very important to us, our company. So Eric and I were thinking, it's going to be nice. And we made this great interface. People could go online, type all their fasteners in, and that was going to be it. Everything, we had everything covered. And then Kevin sent a spreadsheet to us. We'd never dreamed of someone sending us a spreadsheet. I mean, why would you do that? Why wouldn't you just key them in?
Because it's less work for them and more work for you, I suppose, right?
So I got the spreadsheet, came in, and I looked at it. I have no idea what this crap is. What's an SMS? So
that's funny.
What's an HCS? So I showed this thing to Eric, and I said, I've got to send a note back to this guy. Tell him, can he send it back to us in real terminology so we can work out what it is? We'd worked out, we'll pay someone to key it in. We just didn't know what it was. And I still remember Eric knows this. Kevin Henning sent me back an email. I said, if you don't know what this is, then I suggest you shut this business down and start a new one up.
No kidding. Yeah, that's funny.
And I thought, oh, God, we've only had our company running. We only had FCH running for like 3 days, and now someone's telling us we need to close it. So I thought, stuff this. I'm going to work out what this is. So we then realized we had to find someone who was in the fastener industry who could help us with what these abbreviations meant. And we found a company, doesn't exist now, it's called Quality Screw and Nut, QSN. So QSN...
Part of Optimus, I believe.
Okay. They gave us a book called the Fastener Reference Guide, said, here, you need to read this. And then we got help on what were these... Well, SMS, that means a sheet metal screw, but sometimes it can be an S.S or M.S. Sometimes it can have a slashes in it, and sometimes it can be this, and sometimes they can just say type A, TA or something. And so that started it. So we moved slightly out of panic mode. Eric remained convinced it would never, ever work for probably the first year, but we got it sort of working.
That's funny.
And
just quit your other jobs thinking, this is our future. But we don't even know what a sheet metal screw is.
Well, we were still idealistic in realizing we'd solved a problem. We hadn't worked out the deal of the infinite complexity of the naming terminology within the fastener industry. Things that are still with us to this day, incidentally. And so we got it working. Now, over the years, it's got better and better. And, basically, it's still in continuous update, within the last even like 2 days.
But that's funny because I always thought you had this model that was going to make life easier for people in the industry when really it was for the two of you to learn the industry and put it in a working form as opposed to being these helpful gurus who had this product or the scrubber that could solve all their problems. It was really born of necessity.
Right. The scrubber was not not what we set out to do. What we set out to do was to create a website where people could search for nuts and bolts easily. And we did that. The reality was that in order to get the things onto that website, we had to find a way of taking this terribly convoluted, abbreviated descriptions so that someone who didn't know that description could find it. And that was the scrubber.
I didn't know that story. I find that one really fun to listen to. All right, so we're evolving as we go, and I started the interview referring to Fastener's Clearinghouse, and today you're probably more known as FCH Sourcing Network. So as you've grown and developed, so have your products and the things you offer to distribution customers. What are some of the most misunderstood things about FCH Sourcing Network? What attributes excite you and Eric that other people in the general public just aren't getting?
Well, first of all, the fact that we started this, this was 12 years ago. I guess when we conceived the name 13 years ago, Fastener's Clearinghouse, because we were mimicking, I guess to an extent, the area that the nationwide dealt with, which was really the dealing with surplus. And that remained primary for us until, 6, 8, 9 years ago. And some of our members communicate with us and they said, well, why do we have to put our surplus up there? Why can't we actually list our real stuff that we actually make money on? And the answer, of course, was that the scrubber couldn't care two hoots. It doesn't ask you how old the thing is. It just simply says that a hex cap screw, and whether it's in a secondary part of the store, your warehouse, or whether it's in the front part of it, we don't care. And so many companies started listing their ordinary catalogues with us. And so the surplus became a secondary part of what we do. And there's no good way that we never did have a way of telling really the difference. In other words,
sure,
people say to us, well, I'm expecting to find the stuff and it should be cheap. Well, if you're buying stuff from Stelfast or Metric and Multi-Standard, it isn't as cheap because it's old. It's what they sell for a business, okay?
Right.
Of course, it's not. You're not going to get a special deal on 5 of them, whereas you might have if the thing had been sitting in a warehouse for 20 years. So now probably, maybe 60, 70 at least % of all of our inventory is really, I guess, first run stuff.
No, you're right. That's an interesting development. And I've talked to Eric pretty regularly over the years, and I find him excited about different aspects of FCH Sourcing Network, how the industry could get leads from there and things like that. So I'm sure, you're pleased with the growth of it, but I'm sure there are things you think, why don't people use it this way? It's right there for them to use. So
yeah, I know. Well, people look. First of all, the fastener industry is fairly non-adventurous when it comes to the web. Okay,
right.
So that people can use the site, and things that are obvious to us are not obvious to the people who use our site. First of all, and so we decided a long time ago that the clearinghouse actually had to become a negative connotation to us.
Okay,
it was like. A clearinghouse, which
right. The junk store.
Yeah, right. People sort of say, well, it's a junk store. And I said, well, it's not really a junk store, actually.
Right.
You buy stuff from Stelfast, you think they sell stuff on a junk store? I don't think so.
Right.
And so, but the clearinghouse part of it, so we really needed to try and get away from the clearinghouse. And FCH was good. So Eric tells the story, but it's really to do with Kentucky Fried Chicken changing to KFC when the whole fried chicken thing was becoming not publicly acceptable.
Yeah, true.
And so we became FCH. We had the great idea of picking up the FCH.com. We tried that. It's available to a company that doesn't want to sell it at I believe a Jesuit hospital in Boston. And for 12 years we've tried to get FCH away from them. They don't use it. It's been dead for 12 years. They don't want to sell it, though. So,
in a similar vein, I will share that I tried to buy rlenglish.com only to have Larry Kelly from Buckeye Fastener tell me, oh, I bought it. I said, why'd you buy it? Because I knew you wanted it. I thought it was funny. So at least you don't have that. And eventually I did get it. But it's good to have friends who
right.
screw you up.
Oh yeah, we didn't. Well, that wasn't that. We screwed ourselves up in a way because when we started, we weren't in the fast industry when we started the Fastener's Clearinghouse off. So Eric and I, in our infinite lack of wisdom, we decided it was Fasteners with an S Clearinghouse because Fasteners is plural. And it wasn't until we'd been running our company, we'd got past the bit being told to shut it down, okay? We'd actually got the scrubber working and Kevin Higgins' stuff was live, probably not to his satisfaction, but it was sort of live. And we realized that it wasn't the fasteners industry, it was the fastener industry.
True, right.
And so we then realized we need to change our name. We need to change to Fastener Clearinghouse. And already one of these fly-by-nighter crowds had picked up Fastener Clearinghouse. And they were using it to sell sex supplies and all sorts of other things. And they were waiting for us to try and buy it. And every time we tried to buy it from them, it went past to yet another company in Los Angeles. We could never, ever get hold of it.
All right. Though those are horrifying when you hit on something that you think is something else and you get transferred over to a site you didn't expect. So be careful when you look, if you're hungry for a hamburger and you just Google Five Guys or fiveguys.com, you'll be shocked, at least the time I did. I made sure from then on I got a very specific website before I went and ordered hamburgers and french fries.
Right, well.
That's a true story.
Yeah, I'll bet it is. Right. Yeah. Ours wasn't quite as bad. It wasn't quite as bad, but it offered you similar stuff. But yeah, even today, people we talk to on a daily basis, if you tell them, type in Fastener Clearinghouse, and everyone puts in Fastener Clearinghouse.
Right.
That's how everyone knows it. We have never really got people to remember there's an S in it for us, okay?
Well, you guys have done a good job, though, and Eric, it's Fasteners with an S, so you work with what you have, and I do know that catchphrase now, so you've managed to overcome that. Brian, I want to kind of take something you started to talk about, again, the industry itself, and you weren't part of the industry, and I will tell you, as a 33-year veteran of fastener sales, networking, and trying to meet people in the industry, I'm in awe that you two have managed to meet just about every important player in the industry in a very short period of time for guys that didn't even know what SMS was when they began. You really
that's Eric, not me though. But you're right.
Well,
we did when.
You two are partners in crime, and I do acknowledge Eric's, I tease Eric a lot because he's my friend, but he is very good at that. But that being said, you've now been in the fastener industry for nearly 10 years, hook, line, and sinker, whether you like it or not. And I'd just like to get some of your observations on, what you've seen in the last 10 years, the changes even in that short period, and what do you see coming in the next several years?
Well, there have been changes. A lot of them are changes based on succession within companies, okay? I mean, when we started, the resistance to using the web to search for fasteners to anyone else who hadn't decided they were going to do this would have been depressing, like it was wrist-slitting stuff, okay? I mean, the people who wrote us letters explaining why they would never, ever, in their lifetime, ever use the web to conduct their fastener business. And we had letters, one of which we actually had on the wall for a long time. We called it the Titanic letter. And it was a man in California who likened himself to one of the people playing the band on the Titanic as it sank. And he said, this will be me. I will sink rather than ever use the web. Okay? Fortunately, not everyone was as bad as that. And we had things like were troublesome. We had a little trouble actually joining the Midwest Fastener Association because they had no means of letting someone join the association who didn't have a fastener company. Well, we didn't have a fastener company. However, to their great credit, Nancy must have liked the way Eric was speaking to us. They decided to let us become members, and we've had a great connection to the Midwest Fastener Association ever since.
I would guess Eric just had to put a check up front for Nancy to like you.
No,
she likes
it was
her money
more than
on
that.
time.
No. It was more than that. It was more than that. There was some resistance. First of all, everyone thought secretly there was some fastener company backing us. Okay, that was the big talk.
Okay,
who is behind you? No one. We would have loved to have had someone putting money into us. It would have been like a dream come true, but it didn't. That wasn't the case. We had to do it ourselves. So has this industry changed dramatically? Now, we still get people who aren't that wandering past around the show in Las Vegas who aren't that sure. There's still people who, are stuck in slightly older ways, but then, their sons are taking over the businesses and the sons think, why didn't we ever do this? I don't want to tell you, it's your father,
right.
Okay? So attitudes have changed, okay? And I think the industry is very slow to adopt new technologies, but maybe it's the typical conservative approach. It's got to be proved to work properly. So I think, have believed for years, on Fully Threaded, we've always promoted this whole idea of additive manufacturing, so-called 3D printing. It's going to have an effect. It hasn't. People don't quite understand where yet, but it's to do with costing of the equipment and imagination. And, to my mind, there will be a time when distributors as we know them won't necessarily distribute nuts and bolts and screws and things. They'll simply license printers to people, and and they'll have all the designs, and so you'll have a license from a company that might be ABC nuts and bolts now, and you just click a button and say, I want 5 of these things, and it'll be their licensed items that print out for you. Okay,
so that the license will be the invention, and you'll have an invention, and you'll license people to use your proprietary information, essentially.
Yeah, you'll have the 3D design for a bolt or something like that, and not everyone wants to sit around and draw up these plans for everything. So you'll basically license it or pay someone else to put one of their printers in your place, and it'll print out these things, whatever you want. And we're a long way from that yet, but I see that is going to be one of the big changes, that the distributors, as we know them now, won't necessarily have to have stacks and stacks and stacks of all these boxes of nuts and bolts and screws and washers and things. They will have their intellectual property will be the actual design of a hex cap screw, say. Okay,
that is interesting.
And they'll just decide, I want one of these of 316 stainless, and I want, I would need 10 of them made out of ordinary 304 stainless, and I need some made out of ordinary old grade A, okay, grade 2. So now you, along with us, have seen them printing out of 316 stainless, because that's where we went to that.
In Youngstown, Ohio.
Yeah, Youngstown. So we know that you can do that, okay.
Right.
So that's a ways. I believe that, when the dust settles and people have a little better understanding that this blockchain is going to help the distribution industry, it's going to affect it in a strange way, okay, I think.
I wanted to ask you that because you talked on the article, you mentioned blockchain. I get the impression that that's coming down the road, that you and Eric will probably talk in more detail, but what are a couple examples? Because everybody hears about blockchain. Very few people explain it very well. What are a couple examples where you would see blockchain in our industry?
Right. This is where I see it. Now, maybe I'm not seeing it right, okay, which is quite possible. And certainly I've had many people accuse me of being so off beam and isn't funny in the past. But, at the moment, if you think about the process of, say, a distributor, okay? Take it in, it's one simplest form. You could look at it as a distributor placing a order against Charlie Kurt to have some bolts made for them, okay? Or you could look at it as, ABC Fasteners sitting out in the fields in Illinois somewhere, placing an order against some distributor in Chicago. The reality is that the order is really, and the details about it are kept within a computer system which is run by ABC Company, okay? Some guy there sits on the phone, takes the order, keys the stuff in. And the information about what the status of that order is totally contained within ABC Company's computer system. At some stage, an order gets issued to the automatic picking system or whatever they have. Go and pick these 10 bolts, okay? And they get put somewhere, and then, the stuff gets printed out, and then, say, FedEx comes and picks them up. And at this stage, so now all the information about where that stuff is now in FedEx, different computer system.
Right, but not the same one, right?
Yeah. So if you're sitting in this, little ABC Fasteners or whatever you are, and down in the cornfields in Illinois somewhere, you want to know, where's my order? What's the status of it? I know I've called him, but I don't really know. Well, I might be able to go into the company you ordered from. Now I'm in FedEx. So to my mind, one of the things that blockchain can do is it can actually replace or provide a cloud-based
transparency.
Yeah, sort of. Where now there's one system that controls this whole process. And it's not uniquely accessible only by people in the company in, wherever it was in Chicago that's you placed the order on, or by FedEx, who's delivering it to you, or the US Postal Service. The fact is you can trace this order because the order itself is now being put in the blockchain, okay? And every time something happens, this order is updated with its status. And so people who are interested in all stages of a process can be equally able to find out information about it.
Today, there are people that
maybe even,
Today, there are people always looking for that. I get emails every day. Where is my part? Well, we're waiting to get it back from this person or that. And so they try and make it transparent. And ideally you could say, oh, right now it's at the plate, or we're waiting and it'll go to the patch guy after that. You're saying blockchain would help with things like that potentially?
My view of the future, I don't mean as we see it, as it's available right now, because a lot of work has got to be done.
So like next week is what you're saying?
No, I'm not saying that next week. But in the long term, the answer is yes. Those stages will be stages that the company that does the plating, one of their internal processes will be to update this blockchain so that the blockchain always knows along with them. And so now people outside that company can also know if they have access to the blockchain, even as a look and read only, okay?
Right.
So this is how I see it. Whether I see right or wrong, well, fortunately I will probably be some other world where this actually happens. So no one will be able to tell me you were wrong, okay?
Right.
But I see this as something where that would benefit more the people who are the consumers of these services. In other words, the guy who sits, one of your customers who places an order, for instance, okay, how he can find out what's happened to my order. And you're right,
Sure.
There's things that, that get really complicated. Well, how do you do with all this, the work in progress part of it, which is sending it out to be stripped, sending it out to be replated, getting it back, having half an inch cut off the thing because the guy only wanted 2.5 instead of 3 inches, okay? And all those processes that add to the time that it sits around, and it seems like dead time, but it's actually the things are being worked on all the time. It's all very efficient. It's just that it's all in a big giant, like a black hole. And we can learn, I believe, part of how we can open up part of the black hole and make it really visible to people, I think.
All right, Brian. So that's a little bit about blockchain, and I do look forward if you guys cover that in more detail because it's still murky to me, to be candid. But one of the other things we hear about a lot is artificial intelligence. And, you don't necessarily think of that as a fastener topic. Am I incorrect that part of the scrubber is using data and improving itself? Is that, in a small sense, use of artificial intelligence, or am I off base on that?
I'd love to say you're right, but you're off base.
Okay.
Right. And no, I'm familiar with the programming languages of artificial intelligence, actually from my days in the Submarine Corporation, because Apple took me into their project that was running even in 1987, 89, my last contact with them, which was to do with their artificial intelligence process. And of course, there is a language called Lisp that was developed especially for that, came out of Xerox. And I discussed this whole thing with AI actually with Carmen Tomaso. He and I discussed this at length from Stillfast. I would love to think there was a feedback loop. And maybe one day we can build that, because he wanted me to build a feedback loop. And so the system could improve itself. But that would imply that the fastener industry would be able to, send an email or pick up the phone and say, hey, you didn't do this right, okay? That part of the feedback, I don't think we can rely on particularly. I mean, getting commentary at all is like getting blood out of a stone. So relying on someone to actually provide help just as they decide they could help you would be fairly unachievable, right. I believe.
Well, I always enjoy talking, trying to bait you with technology.
I would love to get into that, actually.
But you're the technical side of FCH Sourcing Network, so I do enjoy the topics you touch on on the broadcast. So I was kind of going to ask you a few of those, but I don't want to slow this down to a complete halt by being all about technology. So I did get some questions from scattering of people. So I'm going to hit you with a few of those just to keep things.
Oh, dear.
So
Okay.
here's a kind of off the cuff one. If you could give the fastener industry a kick in the ass in any particular direction, which would it be?
I'm not sure I want to answer that. I don't think I particularly want to give the fastener industry a kick in the ass. It's been good to us, but they'd have to be a little bit more open to technology.
And you touched on that a little bit, which is one of the things that enabled you guys to get into our industry as quickly as you did, but you still have some frustration with people's adaptation of technology.
I did. Yes, I do.
Okay.
Yep.
Couple other ones I will run past you. Someone asked, do you ever think there'll be a unified standard part numbering system in the fastener world? You're a guy that I'm guessing grew up on metric. I don't know if that's referring to that, but why has something like this been so difficult?
Well, first of all, I grew up on the British system of measurement, okay?
Oh, okay.
New Zealand changed over to the metric system in my second year at university, which was a near nightmare. However, it accomplished an entire change in one day. And then we did the monetary system as well as the measurement system. So I grew up using pounds and, knowing Young's modulus and tons a square inch and all that sort of stuff, and then suddenly went to kilonewtons per square meter or centimeter, or whatever it is now, and it was horrific.
Now you got those crazy inches thrown at you.
Ah, yes, but I actually love the metric system. I loved it, and I still do. I don't see that there's a particular need. I used to have the view that you could do all that stuff. I don't see there's a particular need for it. And the reality is, you don't need to know a part number. You don't need to know it like a 20-digit part number to find, a half-inch hex cap screw. We proved 12 years ago that you can just type in hex cap screw and you can half-inch hex cap screw. You can find them. So the numbering system to me is nearly irrelevant. It might be useful to some people. It's not useful to me. FCH has existed by making part numbers irrelevant anyway.
Right.
The description of it is more important. I think that companies go through more headache trying to change part numbers. It isn't that relevant, I don't think. I mean, there is a universal sort of part numbering system. It was brought to my attention by Carmen Vertullo again. It was an ANSI numbering system for parts.
Right.
It's very, 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 very complicated. I'm sure it covers most things very well, but it isn't necessary. I mean, if you can just type part of a description into your computer, and why would you need to try and remember this huge bloody number?
Makes sense.
Right.
And you guys have made it simpler for most.
Right. I mean, I spent 6 years working in Germany in a company, for an American company, that went bankrupt because it had a 12-digit numbering system for contracts, and the numbering system broke, and the company went bankrupt. And we bought $1 billion company for $30 million. Okay.
Some bad decisions along the way to lead you to that, right?
Right. The complete company went broke because of its numbering system. So I think it's
it's an unnecessary thing, is what you're saying.
Yeah, I don't see the need for it.
Okay. All right, I'm gonna turn you to the more lighthearted. So you've been doing you've been doing fully threaded radio now with Eric for nearly 10 years. Do you have some of the most surprising guests, or some that you found to be really entertaining, or are there any that stand out to you?
Well, over the time, we've actually interviewed a lot of really interesting people. The things that stand out to me really are the people who get the equivalent of stage fright when who people you can talk to and they're easy to talk to. And then suddenly you tell them we're recording and there's this deathly silence and they can't say anything. And others who need a little bit of something to get them going. And, Eric and I had these, what happens then, Eric and I start texting each other. So what in the hell do we do now? Okay. So I always remember one of them. Now, he didn't get stage fright, but I guess he was a little bit nervous about speaking, was Joe Greenslade.
Oh.
When we interviewed him. Now, he's an easy guy to talk to, okay?
Right.
And except he wasn't that used to being recorded. And so when we had all this whole interviews. When we started saying, no, we're going to record now, we couldn't get a word out of Joe and think, what are we going to do? So I asked him a question about the metric standards, and that started them talking, and then everything was fine. And he had a really fascinating interview with a guy who's a really interesting guy.
Oh, sure. He's brilliant.
Oh, yeah. But, there's over the times, we've had a lot of really interesting people turn up on FCH. I don't know if I could pick them out particularly. Eric would know more because he deals with much more carefully because he has to edit everything, okay? I just sit there talking and Eric sits there with the computer screens editing everything for hours and hours.
Well, I've several times talked to Eric and recommended someone that I knew, and maybe at the time Eric did not know them very well, but one of my people I always enjoy listening to is Charlie Kerr.
Oh, yeah.
And
right.
I told him, I said, you got to meet this guy. He's a Cleveland guy. You'll enjoy talking with him because Charlie's a very thoughtful, intelligent guy, but boy, he comes straight at you. And I always enjoy talking to him, and it came across the same way on your radio program. And then I'd hear you guys invite him back. So I'm like, okay, good. They must have enjoyed it as well. So there are certain people
no, Charlie, the only problem we have with Charlie is that he's usually either in a car or in the bottom of a giant pit or somewhere where there is really terrible audio, okay?
Yeah.
And if there's anything that's plagued us over our years, it's really, less than prime audio. A lot of the moves Eric has attempted to improve. We've got ourselves better microphones and things. But, Charlie, but he's an easy guy to interview because he has his views, and you have to be careful to steer him away from some that are not quite so publicly acceptable. That's what the editing process is all about.
There you go.
But, yeah. I said, over the years, we've had a lot of really great people on FCH.
Well, it's funny, too. Sometimes there's guys that you could tell Eric set up the interview and he resonated with him. And then, another Cleveland guy that I remember, and this goes back a ways, but Rick Finau started talking about cars with you. And it was like, okay, there's a whole nother path they're going down that, again, that's obviously an interest of yours.
Oh, well, Rick Finau, I wouldn't have known Rick Finau at all, except we were at the Fastener Tech in Chicago. I don't know, it must be 5 years ago or something, 6 years, one of those like that. Rick was working for Brighton Best, and BBI had their booth opposite us. And, when you're setting things up, you're sort of sitting around, you've got these people standing over there, and, they're all, no visitors or whatever, you're just setting stuff up and getting your mind ready and all that sort of stuff. And so we ended up talking to Rick, and Eric probably knew him, but I didn't. And I realized that he was a car guy. And not only was he a car guy, he was restoring a Corvette Stingray, a car that was very near and dear to my heart because I had a beautiful 69 Corvette Stingray convertible in New Zealand. And so we had a lot to talk about. And in fact, I met Rick again at in Cleveland, like what it was 2 weeks ago. That was cool. Yeah. So we do meet these people and from all over the place. And Rick was not, the idea of being recorded to him was pretty weird. For someone as used to talking as he was not used to being recorded.
Yeah, because he's a very he talks quite a bit in person, and he's very animated and excited. So that's funny that he would hesitate at first on your radio program. No, that's kind of funny because you get him going on Ohio State or cars, and look out, which is great. It's great,
right?
Another nice thing about your show is you guys facilitate a lot of networking. I've met a lot of people over the years that you've had on your show, and a little bit of it comes from seeing them on Twitter or social media as well. But I think, you guys have facilitated a lot of introductions of people that now are great industry friends. I think of John Butler. I know he is the voice of Solution Man. I don't think that's a hidden point, but I remember sitting at having heard John on the radio several times, and he and I were sitting out in Vegas or something. And he looked at me, and for whatever reason, he just said, "Oh, that's you! Oh my gosh, I didn't realize that was you." He said, "I thought you were McNulty or something like that." I said, "Oh, McNulty's got good hair, better than I do, so I'll go with that. But, it's just funny. It's like I kind of knew him through your program. And, Andy Pells, I don't talk to him frequently. And J.R. Prall's actually, in my territory. But some of the people I've met through them being on your guys' program. So it's you facilitated a lot of networking and introducing of people, that is very good for the rest of us out here, and appreciate you guys doing that.
Well, I could tell you another person you might want to have a talk about relative to blockchain would be J.R. Prall.
Really?
Who may know a lot more about it than I do, okay?
That's a good point, because that is interesting to me.
Right. So this industry has a lot of very interesting people in it, and they're not people who you would know by walking past them in the street.
Correct. I actually just wrote down a note to myself regarding JR and blockchain.
Right. You should. He's an interesting guy, and he knows a lot about it, especially as it relates to the various types of coins, like, whatever they are. Not Bitcoin, but the other versions of it, Ethereum and others like that.
Right.
So he's got familiarity with that. So you wouldn't think that you go and visit JR in his office and all you understand is, how does this guy know where all these screens are? He's got these screens and things all over the place around him. But he has another life like all of us do, okay?
Sure. And that's what's kind of fun when you get certain people on the program, that you do get to hear a little bit about their personal life. And we appreciate you guys sharing that with us. I told you some people asked some questions, and people want to know about, they say you're a single malt Scotch connoisseur. And what's at the top of your favorite list at the moment? I don't drink a lot of Scotch, but maybe you and I will have to have one, and you can teach me a few things. But that was of interest to some of the people that listen to your program, so I asked the question.
Apparently, I guess it has been known to me, but when I went back to Australia, I don't know, about 5 years ago, I went back and met up with most of my staff who were, in my IT department when we were building the submarine. When I left, I had a staff of 80. So 25 of them got together, and they organised. I said, I'm going to fly down to Adelaide, and they all organised this big party. And then I was reminded by numerous people that I had introduced them to drinking Scotch whisky, which I think must have been thinking, if I was the boss, I must have been way overstepping my bounds to be talking about booze.
What an influence.
With my programming staff. That's the one thing they remember about me, the really interminable interviews I used to put them through, and what they learned about Scotch whisky. So, right, I specialise in the whiskies from the island of Islay, sometimes pronounced Islay.
Okay.
They're this peaty, smoky Scotch whiskies. The primary one, which I like most, is the one called Lagavulin, which I think is the best one coming off that island. Okay. And there are a number. It's a little island. It's, I don't know, probably, it's a very, very small island, but it has like 8 or 9 distilleries on it.
Where's this located? Is this near New Zealand?
It's off the west. No, Ireland, Scotland.
Scotland.
So this is the west coast of Scotland. Right. Yeah. So you've got the island of Skye. That's whiskey called Talisker comes from there, and then Islay is somewhere down a bit south of it, I think, which has mainly Lagavulin. There's another one called Laphroaig comes from it, and Carroll. There's a group of them, okay, but primarily Bunnahabhain, but the best one is called Lagavulin, okay, the 16-year-old one.
Is this stuff readily available here?
Absolutely. Okay. I mean, the problem is you need a fairly bulky wallet. It's
right.
When you start buying a bottle of Lagavulin, it might cost you $90 a bottle, okay?
Okay.
That's a lot of memberships, incidentally. We've got to make sure this whole interview gets really publicised. I've got to increase my purchase of these different types of whiskies.
Well, I think people should buy them for you.
Okay. And apparently you really should also talk to Rosa Hearn, because she may be able to give you a lot more knowledge about it than I can, okay?
Well, that's interesting. Another person who I've become good friends with through social media and your program, and that's funny. I'll have to take that up with Rosa.
Actually, Rosa has talked about her single malts on some of our interviews, actually.
That's funny. There's a community of people. You guys have built a community. It's in the social media as well, and Rosa being really an active person in there. And we see each other at the shows, and there's a bunch coming up. And again, do you have any thoughts on all the shows that are coming up? I know you get stuck in the booth while Eric roams around and has fun and gets free things while you're covering the booth, if I remember that correctly. I somehow remember on one of your programs you were complaining a little bit about that, but we won't go there.
On one of them?
Yeah, at least one.
Everyone after a
everyone.
show. Yeah, right. Yeah.
He's the front man. You hold down the fort, apparently.
Yeah, he goes around, he collects all the free stuff, and every now and again he wanders by showing me all this new stuff he's got. Never gets two of them, of course, okay?
He never brings you back any scotch, though.
No.
That's what you're saying.
No.
Oh, interesting. Right. I see him carrying it around. No, I don't really.
You don't.
Do you have any, what are your thoughts on all these shows? Again, you may not want to touch that question with a 10-foot pole, but there's a lot of them. You guys it's important for you to attend a lot of them. Sometimes you go, sometimes Eric goes, but what are your thoughts? There's been even the bigger shows have changed hands. So do you have any thoughts on that? Or
Oh, we do. I mean, I think in general, look, first of all, we know that the shows at a certain level exist because the little associations, be it North Coast, Midwest, all the others, they have to, that's how one of the ways they make money to fund their scholarships and to fund their training courses. I mean, that's how these local associations fund themselves. So they have to have shows. The problem is that by the time you get those shows and then you start having the big shows, there's a problem. Now there's getting to be probably too many shows. And maybe there are solutions to this, but I think at the moment there's a little too many shows we have to go to, or they're all too close together, and they're maybe not, have been not necessarily organised with careful thought about, how close they are to other shows that exist.
Sure.
I think we would be served with less shows, maybe fewer bigger ones. And my personal view is I actually like, I'm not sure if I'm always want the shows to be in Las Vegas. I understand why they are in Las Vegas. For me personally, I'm not talking from the industry, I'm talking for me personally.
Right.
I preferred, as a place for a show, Cleveland, actually. I know that is like, self-immolation, but I actually, I like the show. I like, it's a little downtown area. You can walk around after the show, go and have a meal in a restaurant and go back to the show. And it's all easy. And it's not that easy. I mean, if you love gambling and you love smoking, Las Vegas is actually okay.
Right.
Because you have to walk through half a mile of smoke to get anywhere.
And I know they talk about moving that show, and the other Fastener Fair has gone into Cleveland and Detroit this year, and we always have Fastener Tech in Chicago. So there's a lot of big cities that people enjoy going to. And you're right. I think sometimes it boils down to how easy can you get into and out of a city. So back in the days when there was a Columbus show, that was the big show, but there would be people that would complain how difficult it was to get in and out. And that was sometimes a deterrent, but at the time, it was still the show.
Actually, we had started our company, 12 years, so it would have been like the first year that we were running it, and I believe Eric may have gone to the show in Columbus.
Well, I can verify that because I remember there was a dinner where I randomly was inviting different people from different walks of the fastener industry, and Eric and I had hung out a little bit in Vegas, I think, at one time after a show, and we just walked around. And so I saw him in Columbus, and I invited him, a bunch of people. Rich Gavotta was at this dinner. I think at the time Don Shan might have been, and he came down with a pretty young woman. Her name was Jackie Ventura. And
wow.
I can tell you that Jackie Ventura and Eric met in Columbus because I gathered this whole group of people. And funny thing is, more and more people start showing up, and people are just eating and drinking. And, it's just like anytime you're with a big group, it's like, I don't know who's holding this dinner, and we're just running up a lot of costs. And I'm not sure who's paying for this precisely, but true to form with the fastener industry, a bunch of credit cards got thrown in and it got split up. But we had gone to dinner down the street, and that's, I believe, where Eric and Jackie met. So, and
wow.
The rest is fastener history. You may want to check with Jackie if she wants me sharing that in public, but I still remember that actual, that's a true story there. So.
Wow, that's cool. Actually, Eric will be doing the editing, so you'll know if you hear no reference to this. Okay.
I have to, not to be, talking about the love connections here, but the lovely and talented Lynn was introduced to you by Eric's mother. Am I correct?
Well, not quite. It
okay.
was by
I thought there was something there.
Yeah, a joint secret plan cooked up by Eric and his mother. And so this goes back to the early days. I think may have formed Galtnet as a company. I can't quite remember, 1999. And I was consulting like every second month. I was going back to Germany, to Cologne. And so when I wasn't there, I was either in Dallas or I'd come up and stay with Eric and he had this condo up in Crash Creek in Naperville. And so Eric, apparently unbeknown to me, they'd dreamed up this plan that this woman that Eric's mother used to work with at the Brookfield Zoo was newly single and needed someone to talk to, apparently. So Eric had this plan. He contacted Lynn. Lynn probably hadn't heard from him for like 10 years or 5 years or something. And suddenly he knew that she had a laptop that needed to be fixed up. And Eric had this friend who knew how to fix up laptops, okay? Truth was, I didn't really know anything about laptops. It was a Macintosh. I would have known what to do. And I didn't really know this was a cook-up, okay?
Right.
But this was Eric and his mother planned this out, and to my great luck, it was that they did it, okay?
Absolutely.
So that's the lovely and talented Lynn Dempsey.
And she is lovely and talented. And for that alone, Eric has earned the right to go wander around the show while you hold down the fort.
No, not necessarily. I never agreed to that part of it, okay?
I'm just trying to say how very sweet and likable Lynn is. That's all. She is a dear person. I always enjoy seeing her. All right, so I'm going to try and wind up what could be another 2 hours of talking with you, but I'm going to backtrack just a tiny bit to, you told me about this gentleman that was going to go down on the Titanic of the fastener industry, the last one standing, which is a noble thought. You know, me being in the industry quite a while, I see a lot of companies that have sold, owners that sold from under their children. Their children were involved in the industry and they cashed out and left it. And I'm surprised by the rapid pace of the industry and consolidation, both on the vendor side and the distributor side. But, you come from outside, and in 10 years, you've really gotten your arms around it very much. But what do you think of the fastener industry and adapting technology and all the things? What are you on the Titanic and going to ride it down? Or what are your thoughts about the future of the industry?
Well, I think that in one form or another, people are going to manufacture things, whether they're manufacturing robotic androids, or whether they're manufacturing aeroplanes. People are going to be making fasteners because they're going to have to, even with glues, a glue is a fastener, okay? Whether it's sold to you by a fastener company or whether you buy it in big buckets from somewhere, we're still going to be, to my knowledge, I can't see how this industry can at the moment go away in our future, okay?
Right.
Maybe things will be welded and never bolted together. It's possible. I don't really know these things, but there will still be some group of people. And if that happens, then the people who sell fasteners today will be the ones who sell welding equipment tomorrow, okay?
Right. Or glue or whatever else.
Yeah, or glue or whatever they're going to use. Maybe they use lasers to blend, bind things together. Whatever it is, the people who are helping you fix one thing to another thing are going to be the same sorts of people. They'll just have different things they'll sell you to do it.
So you see the industry carrying on just like anything. People have to make a living and they'll just adjust. And it actually has been a slower process than in a lot of other industries. So you see it being, people just go with the flow, right?
Well, I don't see it. I don't see any major changes. I can't see what they would be. The problems stay the same. And if you think about it, the fastener industry probably began really in the Industrial Revolution and around Birmingham in England. And some of the things that are produced now are not that different from what were produced back in 1850.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah.
and they're still doing the same job.
Right. And as you visit plants around the country, which with the same equipment that they're being made, you see a lot of old equipment.
Oh, no. Yeah, like in our trip to Autobot, that one of the great pieces of machinery there. Here's this huge piece of machinery. It's like story and a half high, 20 feet high. It spends its whole day banging out these big bolts.
Right.
Built in 1920. The bloody thing's been going for nearly 100 years. I mean, think about it.
Right. That's a lot of those plants. That's a lot of plants like that.
Plants. Yeah, but this thing was built so well that it still can stand these massive loads and things, and still, so maybe it needs to get, every now and again they rip it apart and, rebuild parts of it. But the design was great, and it's 100 years old.
Right.
And it works just fine. Now, I have been in, when I spent my little time in England, in Manchester, I was in one of the plants that was within our Australian-based company that had what was the biggest vertical lathe in Europe, okay? And this thing was for turning, I believe it was propellers of big battleships. And so this thing spun around on the floor and has all these things around it. But the thing was about 45 feet across. And the building still had the camouflage paint left over from World War II on it. There's a lot of equipment, that is still around. I'm sure they don't use this now, but things haven't changed that much. So, we will see changes because, they have to make things lighter, and maybe they go to glues, and it's like the 787, okay?
Right.
Not so many fasteners, but it still has fasteners in it. Even though a lot of it's all made out of epoxies and carbon fiber and stuff, they still use fasteners to types of rivets or things and inserts to hold everything together.
Well, Brian Musker, I've enjoyed the opportunity to talk to you, and I said I was going to wind this up to give Eric something to edit that's not too overly cumbersome. But I would be remiss in asking you one last question, because to a lot of people in the industry, you are part of the Fastener team of Brian and Eric, and he's been a good friend for a long time. I brought up way too many times with him personally that he followed the Grateful Dead around for years, which I find absolutely fascinating compared to the gentleman that we all know and love today. As a final question, what can you tell us a little bit about Eric Dudas, either that you would like to say to Eric or tell us about Eric that would give us some insight into the man who is your long-term business partner, good friend, and part of the FCH Sourcing Network team?
Wow. Where do I start? Well, I guess the Eric I knew 17 years ago when we formed FCH, or we formed GaltNet, should I say, is still the Eric I know today. I mean, he's a friend, and it's very rare, but it's also very good when you actually have a business partner who's a friend, a guy that you can go fishing with, and I think we have a good sort of way we run our business. I mean, there's things that Eric does that would drive me totally crazy because Eric's much more detail-oriented in many things. I'm not. And so some of the things I do, Eric doesn't like doing. So we have a good sort of, business relationship. We don't both end up wanting to do the same things usually. And it's really good to work with someone that you have as a friend. And some of our great business meetings are out on the lake fishing, okay?
And how I avoided talking about that and muskie fishing.
I know. How did you avoid fishing?
I didn't mean to. I get caught up in so many other things, but that's a regular outing for you every year, correct?
Oh, yeah. Look, you could go on for another hour about Eric and my fishing trips, because Eric, I fished in New Zealand, but Eric introduced me to fishing in America, and he took me with his family up to Canada fishing, and they used to catch these giant bloody fish that I would look at and think, I am never going to touch one of those things. They have teeth for a start, and they're too big. This is the way there are many, many, many stories. Okay, I caught my first muskie with Eric. Clearly, he and I used to fish together. I caught my first northern pike with Eric's brother, actually, Joel. So that's a big part of our life too. Okay, it's fun.
That's absolutely a good thing. And I've not been a fisherman over the years, but I didn't grow up fishing. No one taught me when I was a kid, and Eric's asked me to go out a few times, which I may take him up on, but he'll have to be very patient. Me as a fastener nerd, been selling fasteners for all these years and enjoying network and trying to meet people in the industry, Eric will tell me, yeah, I was just talking to such and such. And I'll be like, how do you know him? We go out muskie fishing. I'm like,
Yeah.
I guess it's the equivalent of golf for some people or a ball game or whatever, but it's an important part of what you do for fun, and your friendship has thrived on it, and it's a good thing.
We would think our business has too.
Absolutely. Well, Brian Musker, it has been a joy to get the opportunity to talk to you. I'm sure there's a bunch of questions I did not ask, and some people will say, why didn't you ask him that? And I'll say, because I don't have a radio show. Brian and Eric have one. I don't do that. But again, it's been a real pleasure to get to pick your brain on some things, and look forward to seeing you at the next of many Fastener events that we both attend.
You're right, and I look forward to it too. And thank you for being so gentle on me, okay? I'm just thinking, what is he going to ask? What is he going to ask now?
You're really not a prickly guy. It wasn't that hard to be gentle to you. It's very enjoyable.
We've had fun, okay?
Great.
Thank you. Thanks for interviewing me.
And with that, it's a take. This has been Marty Nolan for Fully Threaded Radio, and we'll be right back with more from Brian and Eric.
Okay. That's good.
Searching for a hard-to-locate, fill-in, or oddball industrial fastener item? Get out to the FCH sourcing network at fastenersclearinghouse.com. FCH is the search engine for hard-to-locate fastener items. Free to use, over 1.5 million fasteners. That's why we call it Scroogle. It's the FCH sourcing network. fastenersclearinghouse.com.
At Brighton Best, we continue to expand our wide range of products, including stainless steel and metric fasteners. Our family of brands include Preferred, U.S. Anchor, and Ironclad Performance Wear. BBI has been a trusted partner since 1925. With award-winning hand tools, gloves, and drywall screws, BBI is the largest master distributor of fasteners in the USA. Tested, tried, and true. We are Brighton Best. To learn more about Brighton Best, visit brightonbest.com.
Parker Fasteners is your premier cold heading manufacturer, forging the future with precision and quality as our top priority. When you think of domestically produced sockets and tamper-proof screws from alloy and stainless, including A286, think Parker Fasteners. Our lockout line of security fasteners feature high torque, oval center pin design, and unique lobes that provide one-of-a-kind security for your customers. Our in-house 3D printing capability makes the prototyping process fast and affordable, and we're ready to produce your large or small run orders with highly competitive pricing and unbeatable lead times. So, forge the future with Parker Fasteners. Visit Parker Fasteners online today at parkerfasteners.com.
My customer sent me a print for a bolt specifically for the machine in his shop, but we can't make it.
Solution man, Ken. Provide me with a print, and my superhuman CNC machining team will custom make it for you faster than a manufacturer's rep drinking at an open bar. Visit the Solution Industries website for details at solutionind.com.
Wow, that is fast.
So are you at the distributive social, huh?
SOLUTION, SOLUTION. Solution Industries. We are Solution.
Hi, this is Lisa Kleinhandler from Fastener News Desk at FastenerNewsDesk.com, where we bring you all things fascinating. You're listening to Fully Threaded Radio with Eric and Brian.
Well, Brian, you and Marty covered a lot of topics, and I hope listeners got a lot out of that. I know I did. I enjoyed working on it with you. And, I guess I shouldn't be surprised that he brought artificial intelligence into the conversation.
Yeah, I was a touch blindsided by that. I mean, I truly have followed artificial intelligence probably since the very early attempts to deal with it, I guess, in the 80s. and then Apple deeply in the early 90s. But, it'll have a big impact, but it takes a while because a lot of what people talk about as artificial intelligence isn't really artificial intelligence. It's computers so computers being programmed to do, that's not artificial intelligence. It's when they are thinking for themselves, that's artificial intelligence. A lot of this is just, a fancy program called artificial intelligence. It's not artificial.
No, it's artificial. It's just not intelligent.
I mean, this is the thing, the deep thinking that people like, I guess, Scott McNeely really have done. So there are some people in this industry who really deeply have thought about how to do it, but it's not what people generally think of as artificial intelligence.
Well, Marty did a good job of mixing up the questions that he threw at you, and that was just one of the technology areas that he covered. And I couldn't help but notice that in the new issue of Link Magazine, right there on page 10, there's a story called New Productivity Tools for Fastener Distributors, courtesy of AI. Took a look at that. Not surprisingly, one of the applications that they tout, and this may fall into the category of not really AI that you were just talking about, Bri, but it's with some of these voice transcription tools.
Yeah, okay. There was a whole thing that I was listening to recently, and it's to do with Amazon. Some professor from Northwestern talking about the fact that, when people detect that Amazon's made a mistake, then people listen to the transcription and correct the logic, it's a manual feedback that wouldn't be defined as artificial intelligence. Now, it seems to people like it is because the next time it answers the question, it's got better. But true artificial intelligence is when it detects it's made a mistake itself, or somehow it gets automatic feedback and it knows to correct itself. That would be how a human would fix it. You'd realize you'd made a mistake and not make the mistake again.
Or in my case.
Okay.
Well, we could do another hour, 36 minutes, Bri, as you well know, but we won't, because that was a very enjoyable hour 36 we just heard. And thanks once again to Mr. Marty Nolan of RL English for helping out greatly in that interview.
Yeah, thanks, Marty. A little bit of pre-warning about which questions would have helped, incidentally.
Now, that would have stymied the authenticity, Bri. I'd like to also thank Kevin Chavis and George Hunt III for their review of the NFDA conference, and Bryan Wheeler of Star Stainless with his account of Stuttgart 2019. Bob GQ Baer joined Mike McNulty on the Fastener News Report. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Bob, of course, honorary chairman of the NFA, Bri.
Yes, I know. I do promise one day I won't have a scheduling conflict and I will actually make it there.
You hear that, guys? Better make it a long meeting.
Right, here I'll get booed out probably, but still.
Carmen Vertullo brought us the Fastener Training Minute, and Carroll Henning with Fastener Fair USA was with us to launch this Fastener Fandango today. Hope to see you all out there in Detroit.
Yeah.
The title sponsors of Fully Threaded Radio are Stelfast. For service you deserve and people you trust, it's still Stelfast. And Brighton Best International. Tested, tried, true. Also sponsoring Fully Threaded Radio, Buckeye Fasteners, BTM Manufacturing, Eurolink Fastener Supply Service, Fastener Technology International, InSequel Software, Fastener Fair USA, ND Industries, Parker Fasteners, the International Fastener Expo, The Worth Group, Volt Industrial Plastics, and Solution Industries, home of Solution Man. Please let us know how you like the show today, folks. And if you've got comments, questions, and so forth, the email address is ftr@fullythreaded.com. @fullythreaded is the Twitter handle.
Right. And I do see your tweets, though it isn't always apparent that I do, but that's one of these things that I do in the evenings.
That's not part of the scheduling conflict, though, is it?
Well, if I have any time in the evening free, not listening to a bloody bird talking to me or something I have on other than that.
Yeah. Well, good job keeping that bird silent during the episode today, Bri. We really haven't had much trouble with it. I shouldn't have announced it at the top of the show.
That's all right.
Well, there's still a moment or two here for him to interrupt. Boy, he comes out with some real Lulus.
Yeah, it does. It says some weird things, and it can sing The House of the Rising Sun or chirp it, whatever they do.
Now, you're not too sick of that yet, are you? Now, speaking of AI, I wonder how Alexa's reacting to having the talking parrot in your house.
Right. Well, fortunately, we haven't taught it how to say Alexa yet. That would be a serious trouble, okay?
Yeah, that sounds like a barrel of fun. Well, folks, we could, again, go on. Brian and I are starting our ramblings again.
Yeah, so we won't.
But we have a specific subject to throw at you. If you can remember all the way back to the top of the show today, we promised to tell you about, I guess you could call it, one form of continuity of government. So as it turns out, during the Obama administration, there was a breach of security that involved somebody hopping the fence at the White House. You remember this, Brian? Occasionally these stories come up, but there was a particularly dramatic one.
I think I remember this.
Well, as a result of this, it was ordered that there would be a new and improved fence put up around the White House. And I know we could definitely derive some humor out of building walls and so forth and all that, but we're not going to do that, because this wall that was mandated during the previous administration, of course, is now the job of the current administration to build.
Okay, so this is sort of pretty ironic, but how is it related to the fastener industry?
Yes, the whole reason that we're bringing it up. Well, of all the companies on the planet to manufacture the fasteners that are going into this new fence, who might they be? Of course, a fully threaded radio sponsor, none other than Parker Fasteners.
Oh, okay.
That's right. Our national security, you could say our national security.
The security of our president, okay.
That's right. It's been put into the hands of fully threaded radio sponsor, Parker Fasteners. So there you go.
Wow. Wasn't so obscure after all. I thought you were going to really be stretching for something here that's pretty close to the heart.
Well, I said it was big news, and so it is.
Okay, that's cool.
I hope our listeners were as excited to hear that news as you were, Bri. And with that...
So do I.
We're going to put this episode of Fully Threaded Radio in the can. Thank you so much for listening, everyone.
Yeah, those of you who are still awake after listening to me drone on for an hour and a half.
You did well. I could tell you took a double dose of Vegemite that day.
I did, actually. Yeah, 2 slices instead of just 1.
Nice. For Brian Musker, this is Eric Dudas. Get out there, sell some screws, avoid parrots.
Yeah.
And we'll talk to you next time.
Okay. Till next time, folks.
Fully Threaded Radio is a production of Fastener's Clearinghouse. Music provided by Audionautics.